Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Director Watch, an AwardsWatch podcast that attempts to get inside the mind of cinema's greatest auteurs, explore what drives them, and maybe we go on a few unrelated tangents along the way. I'm Ryan McQuade, the executive editor here at AwardsWatch, and joining me as always is my wingman, JD Ledbetter.
Ryan, I've got the need. The
Need for speed? Okay.
And let me ask you this. Is this the big Tony Scott one? Is this the biggest Tony Scott episode?
I mean, are we saying it early on that this is the big one and no one else should listen?
This is the one that gave him the ability to be the Tony Scott that we know, right?
It is. I would say it's the biggest film, but it doesn't mean it's the best film.
No,
about that.
No.
But then also too, I mean, like, I don't know, generationally speaking, I guess it is very relevant because of the sequel, and we'll talk about Maverick today as well.
Maybe it's Domino.
No, I was thinking, like, is Crimson Tide that?
No.
Enemy is Man on Fire that? Man on Fire is pretty big because of Denzel.
So. It's pretty big, but this is
it taking Pelham 1, 2, 3?
If you go into box office and you adjust for inflation, I think this is the biggest film he's ever made. I think if you
Deja vu
look at cultural influence, I think this is low-key one of the most important movies of the last 40 years.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. I mean, no big deal, right?
If it's not the big one, it's a big one.
I mean, I think he's at the intersection of a lot of great moments and movie stars and what we think of them now. And
just think about what we don't have if this movie doesn't exist. It's a lot.
Beach volleyball scenes?
There's no Michael Bay. Tom Cruise is not the Tom Cruise that we know today.
Would we have
the domino effect of this film is monumental.
Will we have Kenny Loggins doing theme songs?
No, Kenny Loggins he'd be homeless.
Damn it. Yeah, he would. He had to be like shacking it out with Messina.
Yeah, all he had at this point was Caddyshack and Footloose. I mean, he'd be
yeah, minor hits. Caddyshack and Footloose.
Nothing.
Yeah, just nothing. I mean, nothing you can really hang your hat on as a commercial songwriter. For God's sakes. Yeah, I forgot if those had come out before. I know definitely Caddyshack came out before, but I didn't know when Footloose came out. I guess it was early 80s, right?
Yeah, maybe 84 is when Footloose.
Talking about another movie that's about repressing, your thoughts, your feelings.
Don't spoil it. Yeah,
well, I don't want to spoil things. I'm just saying, Kenny Loggins.
I'm just glad it'll only be the two of us on this episode.
Well, that's not true, Jay.
Oh my God.
We have a guest. I told you, we got a guest on every show. Right? Every show.
Oh, man.
And,
there is a third pane on this Zoom call.
To be fair, Jay, if we're going to say that this is the big one, we had to bring in a big guest.
Yeah.
We had to bring in the guy.
He could be my wingman anytime.
Exactly. We had to bring in the original instructor, I guess. The
Viper.
The Viper.
Our movie podcast.
Of our movie. That's what I'm trying to get at, baby. Okay. Is the creator and founder and co-host and film critic of InSession Film, none other than the man himself, JD Durant.
Hey, thanks for having me, fellas. I'm so glad to be here to talk about one of the best films ever made.
Ever made?
Wow. Ever made. Oh, my goodness. I am thrilled. I am full of adrenaline. I am ready to take it to the skies. Let's do this.
Are you going to do like some maneuvers that we've never seen you do on a podcast before?
Maybe do a split S?
I don't want to know what that is. I mean, thank God for the listeners. This is an audio podcast because it sounded like you were getting real risky. But there was a lot of, I guess, risque things in Top Gun.
There is.
Well, it is weird. JD said he just came from a volleyball match, but he's in jeans.
Okay.
Lost 1,000 pounds.
Jay, you brought it up. I gotta say, this is going to be one of, by the way, listeners, if you've listened to Director Watch and you know tangents, are a part of the game.
This
is going to be the most probably tangent episode we've done so far.
No,
because we have the guy that initially enabled.
No. But he also
did. He tried to suppress it, but now technically he's going to get every tangent alive for this movie, and that's why we kind of brought him on because he loves this movie. And I knew you did, JD, and that's why we had to have you here. But we're going to go on a lot of tangents. The first one... I
am the captain now.
Exactly. Jeans on a sand volleyball court. I think that's probably one of the most diabolical things about this movie.
But there is a purpose to
the jeans? Well, are we going to have to wait to talk about that? Or
it's because he was going to his date.
Yeah.
Well, but like he can't like.
What do you want to do? Go down to his skippies?
I mean, everyone else.
It's not inconceivable given this movie.
Given this movie, they would just do it butt ass naked. Is what I'm thinking. But no, I mean like clearly everybody else has errands and things to do the rest of their day. But clearly everyone else
checking his
showed
watch.
Up here.
It's really
he kept showing up here to play a volleyball game, and he knew he was going to get roped into it. He's not dressed for a volleyball game, and that's got
an impromptu game.
How they win? Well, I mean, how they win that? Like they said that they tied it up, right? Because they lost the first match. He had a whole match because he had to get used to the fact of these jeans. Yeah, and they're skin tight on him. Yeah. Like I didn't know skinny jeans were invented back then in the 80s.
It all began with Tom Cruise.
I guess so. That's a fact. Wearing some lady jeans, maybe. I don't know. I mean, they were tight. They were painted on this man in there, and
looking good.
He's looking. I mean, he's looking fit in this movie. But anyway,
but you need to fly planes.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Well, Star Wars. I get like there was that one guy that dies in Star Wars, the original StarArs, and some of those guys didn't look like really fit either in those X-Wing.
Spaceships are very different. The gravity is all
science doesn't apply.
I'm just saying this movie got it realistically right.
Science is a huge part of that, but the gravity in space is totally different, right?
Yeah, but when I
understand science,
I don't understand science either. Math is, I guess it's for Jay. He's Mr. Spreadsheet.
Physics is. I've got a whole spreadsheet laying it out.
The cockpits are very, very small, so you have to be a specific demeanor to be accepted to actually fly one of those planes. Like I can talk about it.
You can talk about it. Just go.
Because
just go.
Like part of my love for this film is because I grew up wanting to do this, not necessarily because of this film specifically, primarily because my uncle grew up flying in the Air Force, and I was close to him as a kid. So I wanted to follow him in his footsteps. Now, him introducing this film to me and watching it 1,000 times growing up certainly was a part of it. But as I got older, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to fly for a couple of reasons. One, I have asthma. At the time, they were not accepting. Any branch of the military would not accept you if you had asthma. But even if I didn't, I still wouldn't have got accepted. You know why? Because I would have been too tall. I would have been too tall to fit into
JD, how tall are you?
6'2".
Okay. What's the threshold? What do they stop?
Man, I can't remember. I think it's
5'5".
A little bit taller.
Tom Cruise is the ideal pilot.
Well, yeah. I mean, like he's the ideal pilot and jockey. All right.
The F-22s and 35s today might be a little bit more spacious, but this was pre any of that.
Yeah.
But like the Tomcats that they're flying here, I mean, you no more than 6 feet, you're not flying.
But you know, JD, you're absolutely right, because like, and this is just a little bit, this is going to be a humble brag, I guess. Because I recently, I was invited to a premiere, and I got to meet Top Gun Maverick star Glenn Powell. And
cool guy.
He's a super cool guy. Texas Longhorn, hook him.
Handsome.
Very handsome guy. Thought about just leaving the wife there at that moment and just running off. And honestly, could she blame me?
How did he feel about that?
I mean, I told him we go watch movies, watch Longhorn football. I make barbecue. Sounded like a pretty good compromise.
And that's all he needed.
That's all he needed. Maybe, you know. but he's 6 foot.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, because like movie magic, I thought he was like 6'3". I thought, because he always plays like the
I
big...
never thought he was that tall. I mean, he's lucky that he stands next to Tom Cruise, I guess. But
even in Maverick, he looks like a bigger
tall.
He looks like a bigger guy in that movie. And I was like, "Oh, okay." He's kind of and so JD's saying the height requirements for this thing. It's like, well, now that makes sense that he's that height. You know what I mean? Because
I looked it up as you were talking there. I'm 20 years too late, because in 2020 they removed restrictions and now they've capped it at 6'5". So
wow,
that I assume that they're inferring that with some of the new planes.
Yeah,
you can fit taller
bigger cockpits,
pilots in it.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
We can do it now.
Yeah. So yeah, you could technically do it now. Just give up everything else in your life and just fly across the world.
They would love a 35-year-old first-time pilot. They'd love that.
But no, I think JD's wife would be like, "Where the hell are you going? Like, leave me here alone with the 2 boys? Like, what the hell? You're not going out to fight in any mysterious war with some mysterious enemy." Right?
I'm going out to the Mediterranean just in case.
Just hanging out.
I mean, but even if you remove the whole cockpit space element of it, I mean, when you're flying these jets, you're going up to 10, 11, 12 Gs, depending on a turn. You kind of have to be in shape in order to
because you could that pass
kind of
out
on the body.
Yeah,
like
it's it's grueling.
It's absolutely grueling. That's what a typical dogfight will last 3 to 4 minutes.
Well, it won't
go longer than that.
I'm not really into that sort of thing. I mean, like, I
Somebody
understand.
Hasn't seen Top Gun.
I mean, dogfighting is not really a sport I'm into a lot. I don't really condone it.
You need to watch the movie before coming into the conversation.
Okay. You're talking about the Top Gun dogfighting. In the air. Okay, that's right.
In the air.
Well, I just know that we get on sports tangents sometimes, and I know Jay's from Atlanta and Mike Vick and all.
It's a big part of my Falcons dogfighting.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry,
Jay, didn't mean to bring bad joke to be brought up. Jay's
Here's a question, JD, as a big air warfare guy, what's your favorite aerial battle of all time?
Battle?
Good God, man.
This is I've been waiting my whole life.
Fuck it. You opened up. You opened up
for someone to
fucking Pandora's box.
When I was in college, I was in a world military history class, and I got fairly deep into this. So
by the way, before we continue, nerd alert just for everyone out there. When we do nerd alert to end this, then you know that we're gonna get into the movie. But go ahead, Jay.
Oh my gosh, what a moment! I have been waiting my whole life for this. So my favorite aerial combat is from World War II. It is,
of course.
It's called now the Legend of Y-29. So this took place over the airspace of Belgium, and this was during the Battle of the Bulge, and it was this last ditch effort from the Nazis. And at this point in the war, the Luftwaffe had been diminished quite heavily. However, they wanted to have a full out of force, so they sent all their planes into the sky. And, all throughout that part of Europe, I mean, it was this huge, large scale. But there were, in Y-29, it was this region where they were, kind of protecting certain borders. And in this battle, it had, for World War II history, and again, this is like in the weeds, nerd stuff. But
this is good stuff.
One of the more famous moments of the air war in World War II is so there was this was, I forget the actual date, but this was like early in the morning, and they were getting ready to take off these Mustangs. The Blue Nosed Bastards of Botany is the unit, and They're on the runway waiting to just fly that morning. Like this was routine. They weren't even waiting, or they weren't necessarily flying in the action. There were thunderbolts already in the air, kind of patrolling. And as they're sitting on the runway waiting for the time for them to take off, they hear these thunderbolts engaging in dogfights. And so the captain is like, hey, we're just going to go without orders. Like like he could have been court-martialed just for doing that. But, there's action in the air. They have to do their job. So they take off without permission anyway. And as the leader, as he's flying up, his landing gear isn't even up yet. So as his landing gear is going up, a Focke-Wulf 90 flies right in front of him, shoots him down as his landing gear is coming up. It was one of the more iconic moments of that battle and of the war. And as this aerial combat is going on, I mean, it's a huge furball, planes everywhere. And during the escalation, it was like the ratio were something like there wasn't a single U.S. plane to be shot down. I think one was damaged and had to land due to damage. But they shot down something like 33 planes over Y-29. So it was pure domination, absolute domination. Think the New England Patriots against the Falcons in the second half of that Super Bowl. That's what we're talking about.
Oh,
here.
man.
Sorry.
God damn. Jay's catching strays.
A knife to the heart unnecessarily. All joking aside, though, but it was just pure domination and showed how much of an advantage the Americans had in the war at that time. And it's a pretty amazing moment during that war. But yeah, I love it. I've been
nerd alert
to tell that story forever.
We've gone from sports nerdetry to war nerdetry, and I love it. This is great.
Yeah, if I was to make a movie, that would be the story I would tell. Because that's also one of those World War II stories that nobody is aware of unless you're listening to this right now. Most people listening have never even heard of what I just talked about. So it's an unfamiliar story that I think would play very well on a big screen.
Who'd have thought we would get so educational on the fucking Top Gun episode? It's just so wild.
Realistic film. It's down and dirty, really getting into the weeds on the truth about naval warfare.
I mean, if you want to tie it to Top Gun, though,
there we go.
So Y-29, you could say is the peak of American domination in terms of the air war, like dogfighting in World War II, like quintessential. Like that's how you survive. That's how you win. From that moment through the mid 80s, dogfighting had the military thought it was going to be obsolete. Now, when in Korea, it was still a big part of that war because even though it's jets, they hadn't really developed missiles yet, so it was still close range gun kills there. But once you get to Vietnam, infamously they removed all of the dogfighting, so that's ultimately why they launched Top Gun in the first place. So
woof woof.
If you want,
nowadays you got Ed Harris, aka the Drone Ranger. Manned planes are barely a thing anymore.
Yeah, God, the pilot might be gone.
I love Ed Harris. He's so good in that little part in Maverick. He's so good.
Anyway,
we gotta wait to.
Should we talk about Tony Scott?
We should talk about Tony Scott. We still haven't come up with a nickname for him. We're
the Scottster.
The Scottster. Ooh. Mm-hmm. Well, we had the Riddler.
It's the Riddler.
Yeah.
The Riddler. Yeah.
And
I want to.
I guess maybe that's
the tone setter.
The tone setter.
Why not?
Sure, why not? He's a master of tone.
Mm-hmm.
He is.
Yeah, he is a master of tone. He is. You know what, Jay? We just figured it out. Good job, buddy. Here on out.
It took me 3.5 seconds.
Most of your good ideas, 3.5 seconds.
Yes.
Ever in the podcast.
Don't let me think too hard. I'll come up with a very bad idea.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a coin flip. It's like 50-50 of whether it'll be good or not. But this one's good. The tone setter. All right. Well, JD, we brought you here to talk about Tony Scott's film Top Gun from 1986. I got to ask you though, buddy, what your relationship with Tony Scott is as a filmmaker, what you think of him. Are there things you like about him a lot? Are there things that you don't like about him a lot? And then I got to ask you the important question that we're asking everybody during this series. JD Durant, would you, and you have to choose one, and you have to choose. You can't play this yes and no kind of thing.
Okay.
Whose filmography would you rather take? Okay. Ridley Scott or Tony Scott's?
Oh, boy.
Not as like you're gonna watch them rest of your life. You can only watch one of them.
I can only watch one
filmography.
Man, that is tough.
I mean, I guess that's not how we really phrased it. I guess we did phrase it as whichever one you wanted.
I mean,
we didn't put it like a Lonely Island like that. So just whichever one you want.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because if you frame it that way, Ridley's got twice as many movies as Tony.
He does.
That's true.
So
but he's also got a lot of crap.
Yeah,
and I guess that's
it's the great conundrum.
It's the conundrum. Like, do you get to the crap? Do you have to watch the crap in order to watch the good stuff, or do you just watch
higher ceiling?
But then you're like
garbage.
Yeah,
or nothing but good stuff.
Or Mr. Consistency, but you're like, but like Alien and Blade Runner don't exist in my memory anymore. So it's like, so it is the conundrum. What would you pick?
Yeah, that is tough. I mean, I do think Ridley has higher highs, as Jay noted there, but man, the consistency of Tony is really fantastic. And I don't know, it's interesting because when Ryan came on our show a few weeks ago and we were talking about Quentin Tarantino, and in that conversation I was like, it's okay if you do 11, 12, 13. You don't have to cap yourself at 10. And while I still hold true to that, I do find myself maybe looking at that sentiment hypocritically, because Tony Scott has half as many movies and they're way more consistent. So maybe there is some truth to what I'm saying. I don't know.
He never got to make his House of Gucci. You know what I mean?
The argument is, right, Tony Scott has half as many movies, but he might have more good movies than his brother, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the movie that we are talking about today, Jay, you are, I mean, stating it is a phenomenon. And I mean, if you want to put that on the same, I mean, like, yes, Ridley has a lot of big films, but does he have is Alien a phenomenon?
Alien is a phenomenon. Yes.
Is that a phenomenon? Okay.
Absolutely.
Is Blade Runner a phenomenon? No. Is Gladiator a phenomenon?
Gladiator was a phenomenon. Blade Runner has sustained in ways that almost none of Tony's movies really have.
Yeah.
I would argue.
I mean, I will say this though. Ridley has obviously many more movies and more misses. But if I was to just kind of pick out the films of his that I love, there's probably about as many that I think are as good. So in a lot of ways, like if I'm just looking at the good stuff that they did that I love, it's probably way more even from that perspective.
If you do both of their filmographies, I assume you have Alien and Blade Runner 1, 2. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Between both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's
that's fair. Yeah. I'm not.
So then
what's 3?
Is Tony 3, or do you have to even go one more to get to Tony?
No, Tony would be 3. Yeah. Easily. Yeah.
I agree with you, but would you have what some people I think would have Gladiator 3?
Some people would. Some people would have what? What would be the other thing? What would be the other one? Thelma and Louise, I guess.
Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Thelma and Louise, probably.
Thelma and Louise is pretty great. That would be
there.
high for me. Yeah. The Martian would be high for me.
Yeah. So a lot of people like Black Hawk Down. You and I, Jay, are kind of.
Is this your favorite Tony?
Oh yeah, I wasn't being facetious when I.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Well, we did a podcast at InSession Film like a year ago, like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where we did our top 20 films of all time. And I don't remember this being on your top 20.
It's not. It's not in my top 20
in your personal, but it's like
top 20
is
high though. Yeah.
Blade Runner isn't.
If you watch a movie like he said, like 100 times from like your childhood and everything, it might bound be on there. Like I'm not putting him on the spot or anything. Like it's an important movie. Like
look, the movie I've watched the most times is Hocus Pocus, and I hate that movie.
Well, that's because
that's marriage.
Yeah, that's marriage. You have to compromise, buddy.
Yeah.
How many times did you watch it last year?
I've gotten it down to 1 or 2 times each October, but over the course of the last, oh my God, we've been together for what?
See, I think the movie now that you guys watch all the time and it's a banger, you're always watching The Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah, I mean it's a great.
That's
movie.
a good one.
Yeah, you're always watching that movie, and
she loves that movie. That's kind of her
comfort movie.
Default. Yeah,
and like for me,
this comes around every October.
Yeah,
and there is a character named Jay in it, which is cool.
Yeah,
and he's the coolest character. But
of course,
overall, that movie is hot garbage.
I was gonna say, okay. And how about the sequel? You got thoughts on that?
Oh my God, what goes beyond hot garbage? A dumpster fire.
A dumpster fire. Yeah. I never saw. I never saw that one, and I barely remember the original. I never liked it when I was a kid, so I never went back to it.
I've got a little bit of Stockholm syndrome for it at this point, where I'm like, oh, I like.
Is she like Clockwork Orange you?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Is she gonna introduce it to Jet? Is she gonna make the?
No, not allowed.
No, okay. You putting your foot down on that. Yeah, but then that means she's going to be like, well, then you can't show him such and such. You can't show him Mishima, Life in 4 Chapters.
No. He's going to watch Heat. I think Heat will be his Hocus Pocus.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I just want him to imitate Pacino.
A 3-hour Michael Mann opus as his favorite film.
I want you for Halloween this year, you to dress up as De Niro and your child to dress up as Al Pacino. I think yeah, exactly. The listeners can't tell, but Jay's doing his Robert De Niro face. It's perfect. You're going to meet me. Come on. What if I do? I've
been loving, I'll tell you this, I've been loving JD's watching movies with his son content recently.
Yeah, you've been doing. He's been
fun.
Real touching.
Yeah,
it's been great. No,
I was there for the Spider-Man 2 conversation. I was like,
oh my gosh,
God,
that was
unreal. There wasn't a dry eye in the house that night. But he also did what you did, Jay. He also almost beat the living shit out of somebody in the audience that night.
Almost had to.
And like A Quiet Place
2,
Part 2, Jay Ledbetter, where you almost
literally yelled at his child. Yeah.
Hey, shut the hell up.
Jay, are you trying to be as annoying as humanly possible? And then he stopped.
He got really scared. Do you think you're going to see them when you see the new film come out? Like those guys are going to still be
Quiet
there?
Place. What's it called? Day One.
Day One, baby. Yeah. I hope y'all can share a popcorn or something.
Man, my theater going recently has been embarrassing.
Do you guys like to go with the normies?
I don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice because you don't have like a lot of critic screenings in your area, JD?
No, I mean I do. There's plenty here, but
just doesn't work out with the schedule.
Is timing because they show them.
I'm with JD on this too.
Yeah, they do them at 6:30, 7 o'clock, and that's like prime hanging out with my kids' time, which I don't like to miss all that much. And also with Brandy's schedule, a lot of the times I can't miss anything.
Yeah, my wife works a lot of nights is the problem with me. I will say this, most of the time I would rather go to like a Saturday, Sunday matinee than go to a later screening with a lot of people in it.
Okay. Yeah. Like with the promo screenings.
Oh, the promo screenings. Look,
those are notoriously
one of my most recent screenings was the Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Frozen Empire. Get it right, sir.
Public screening. Hellish. absolutely hell on earth.
But you love that movie, so it was worth it.
Yeah, I give it a solid D-.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, so I assume, well, JD didn't want, once again, this is what I knew JD was going to do. He was going to try to stall us and get us on a tangent and not actually answer.
We went through the Ridley Tony thing. What do you think of? I think
you got to answer the question. I think he went to Ridley. To be fair,
did he end up going to Ridley?
I think he was kind of going more Ridley.
I mean, I was weighing between the two, and then I don't know where.
I don't know where we went.
I mean, if you know, like, gun to my head, have to choose, and I can't just pull apart Ridley's filmography. I think I might go Tony. I'd like just for the consistency. Yeah.
I think that's two Tonys because Josh picked Tony last week.
Yeah.
So and we both picked Tony.
But what do you think of broader Tony Scott? What's your relationship with Tony?
Oh, I love Tony. Tony's the best. Like I was.
Is he great?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Is that an unfrosted reference?
Oh God, no! We're not doing that today. No, you can't do this. Wow. You can't bring up this movie. No,
I don't. Like,
I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna stop you ahead of time, Jay.
Hugh Grant plays Tony the Tiger.
We are God. We are not doing this. We are not doing Unfrosted. That is a different movie series for Seinfeld down the road.
This episode is even more off the rails than normal.
Exactly.
Tony Scott. Tony Scott.
What do you think?
Anyway, Tony Scott. I love Tony Scott. I genuinely love Top Gun. If we're putting all of the films into a ranking, as you suggested earlier, like Top Gun is easily number 3 of all of those films. I'm probably with the consensus that Alien and Blade Runner is 1 and 2, but Top Gun isn't that far behind for me. Like I truly think it's one of the best films of the 80s. It's one of the best blockbusters ever made, and generally, I love the fun and the energy of Tony Scott's films. There's a pulse to them that I think is magnetic. There's always great performances, wonderful tension, and with a lot of them, I think there's quietly things happening underneath too that doesn't get talked about as much. So, I love Tony. I mean, there's maybe 1 or 2 on here that I'm like, okay, that's kind of middling, but a lot of these I think are at the very least quite entertaining, all the way up to this is a great movie.
I agree. I love Tony Scott. Because that's why we're doing this series.
One day we're going to do a director that one of us just doesn't like. And that'll be fun.
No, I don't think we're going to do that.
That would be fun.
Who would you do?
Well, that's the question: is who is one that one of us likes and the other one genuinely just doesn't like?
I think Linklater's that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I
don't think you hate him, but I just don't. You're cooler on him.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he's like a god or anything, but I think he makes good movies. You know what I mean? You're a big Aronofsky guy.
Oh my God, we both did it.
Damn it! We've been podcasting way too long. I mean, JD, this is like you with Brendan, right? You podcast way too long with someone. You then at a certain point you're not going to be able to find anything but commonality, right? At a certain point,
sure.
Like it's really tough.
Brendan Cassidy, of course, JD's co-host on InSession Film. For those unfamiliar,
check it out. Go check it out.
We went at each other's throats for challengers because it was such a rarity for us to disagree. That
did he not like it?
No, I was mixed. I'm mixed.
You're mixed on it?
I'm mixed on it. Yeah.
We're all about
I can't imagine getting in a heated debate with JD. That sounds impossible.
For everybody out there, notoriously, these two have had some rap battles.
Yeah.
A couple of battering rams.
Yeah, it was a little. Yeah, there was a couple
unstoppable force, immovable object.
Yeah, it was some Kendrick Drake stuff going on. You know,
yeah.
Whoever wants to be what is up to y'all.
Yeah.
But all right, enough stalling. We're here to talk about Top Gun. But JD, I know that this movie is very important to you. You saw this at a very young age.
Yeah.
It is like Jay said, it is a phenomenon. We don't really have to reinvent the wheel in talking about what this is. I think people know what Top Gun is. who's in it. But if they don't, it's Tom Cruise, and it's Kelly McGinnis, and it's Val Kilmer, and Anthony Edwards, and you know, Tom Skerritt, Michael Ironside, who's amazing in this movie.
Tim Robbins, Merlin.
Tim Robbins, yeah, he's Merlin.
He's too tall for a plane.
He's too tall. He is too tall for a plane. You're damn right he is, because that is a tall glass of water, Andy Dufresne.
You know what? Actually, this movie's terrible.
No. As students of the United States Navy's elite fighter weapons school compete to be the best in the class, one daring young pilot learns a few things from a civilian instructor that are not taught in the classroom. That's IMDb's description of this movie. It's not probably far off to say, but there's some stuff in between there. JD, you love this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you kind of laid your cards out, but again, rewatching this, obviously, like you did for the show, what about Top Gun makes you still love it after each rewatch?
So there's a line from Wolfman early on when Jester is talking about why Top Gun exists in relation to dogfighting, and he says, "This gives me a hard-on." When I hear Kenny Loggins sing "Revving Up Your Engine, Listen to Our Howling Roar," and you hear those jets roaring, I can relate with Wolfman. That's all I'll say.
All right, good.
I can relate with that.
Kids, get out of the room. In the podcast.
I mean, yeah, I love this. I know that some see this, and this has been a reputation for quite a long time, that, you know, it can be viewed as some sort of jingoistic advertisement for the Navy. And there's been plenty of conversation about that. But I think that's just a testament to Tony Scott's direction and how arresting the dogfighting sequences are, in addition to the drama that we see here. Scott and cinematographer Jeffrey Kimball do such a phenomenal job of capturing the raw intensity of the F-14s in action, with the way they move, the speed at which they're moving, the crackling of the engines as they maneuver. There's nothing about it that's false. It's all practical and authentic. And when combined with these characters and their engaging personalities, it makes for some captivating cinema. The filmmaking here is just incredible. It's really fantastic. Tony Scott's direction in this film is vividly evocative, extremely effective, perhaps the best of his career. The script here may not be aiming for Oscars, but I think it has more nuance than it's been given credit for, historically speaking, especially if you're looking at it through the prism of blockbuster filmmaking. It has a dramatic bite that is effective, and its thematic underbelly is fascinating. It's great. I love the pageantry here. The spectacle is amazing, but it's more than shirtless pilots and stimulating dogfights. As a deconstruction of bravado and camaraderie, I think this film has a lot to offer in that regard. And then you couple all of that with Harold Faltermeyer's score, which is incredible. Kenny Loggins, the soundtrack. I mean, this is about as good as a blockbuster gets. I truly think this is one of the best blockbusters ever made.
It certainly was a giant hit. It was a movie that was made on a $15 million budget and made close to $360 million worldwide. Became a phenomenon, and it launched.
It wasn't even like its opening weekend. Not that great.
Not that great, but you know what it had?
Just kept going and going.
You know what it had? It had legs, baby. It had legs,
even up in the air.
It had wings.
It had wings, and it flew. Well, I mean, even Maverick wasn't like a gangbuster the opening weekend, right? And then it kind of grew from
that it was pretty big, but it did stay.
It was super steady.
Word of mouth, freaking.
Well, it helped that movie had like the sequel had come out for like 40 years.
They had at my work recently, I was at something where it was like meet the employees, and one of they had like an icebreaker question. You could pick one of like 10 questions, and one of the questions was, what's the movie that you recommend to everyone? And I was like, Top Gun Maverick. It's like the most agreeable movie of all time. It's not super challenging. It's exhilarating. you will have a good time with it. And I've seen that movie like 10 times since it came out, just because it's like, hey, somebody whose taste I don't really know, let's put on Top Gun Maverick. I bet you'll like it. I'm almost certain you'll like it.
Yeah. It's a fair bet for sure.
And so now, with that said, though, Jay, you think that everybody loves Maverick, and I know how much you love Maverick, buddy. We're going to talk about that too today. But what do you think of Tony Scott's Top Gun? Do you agree with JD that it's maybe one of his best, but then also too, is it one of the great American blockbusters in cinema history?
Well, Ryan, before we do that, let's get into some context, okay, my man?
Okay. All right, buddy.
Look, I do some research. I gotta talk about.
That's right. He does read. I don't know if you guys know this about Jay. He likes the book every now and then.
Love a book. Love a book.
What's the book title again, just for the listeners out there?
Tony Scott, A Filmmaker on Fire, from author Larry Taylor. It's honestly a pretty lean book, but it does pack a lot in a pretty
much like a Tony Scott production.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if you kind of look at the history of this film, right? Don Simpson, Jerry Bruckheimer, two of the most powerful producers in the history of Hollywood. They actually kind of got started with films like American Gigolo and Thief, is where they kind of cut their teeth. Their big breakthrough was Flashdance, then Beverly Hills Cop, and now they're cooking with freaking gas. And Jerry Bruckheimer one day is at the dentist. And what does he see? A magazine, and on the cover is the cockpit of a fighter jet with two other fighter jets sort of outside of the window. And he reads the article. The article is called Top Guns. And he says to himself, this is like Star Wars on Earth. We should make a
that's what I was saying.
Jet movie.
Yeah. That's what I was saying.
And so Jerry Bruckheimer starts pitching this movie. He has nothing to go on except fighter jets. Cool. Let's make a movie about that. And so he commissioned some people to make a script. It kind of goes in and out of flux. Tom Cruise, while this was in pre-production, was actually working with Ridley Scott on Legend. And they kept approaching Tom Cruise and said, hey, we'd love for you to do this movie. And Tom Cruise was like, no, this is stupid. What are you talking about? And then Simpson and Bruckheimer are like, all right, we got one chance to convince this guy to do this movie. They're like, come to this airstrip. We'll fly you around in a Blue Angel jet. Tom Cruise goes up in the jet, comes down, basically covered in vomit. And he's like, let's do this. That was awesome.
That's when he became a junkie.
I love jets. Yeah. That rocked. And then they've got Cruise on board. That was the most important piece. And then they're like, okay, well, who's going to direct the movie? And it's such an interesting relationship Bruckheimer and Simpson and Tony Scott have. Bruckheimer and Simpson met Tony Scott on a river rafting trip in the Grand Canyon. And they remember, Bruckheimer specifically was kind of like the Tony Scott advocate. And he remembers seeing Tony Scott scale a 30-foot rock wall without any gear, no gloves, no ropes, no nothing. And Bruckheimer was like, this guy's got the sense of adventure required.
Yeah, I would say so.
Do you think that's where Cruise stole the Mission Impossible 2 opening, was from Tony Scott?
Maybe so. Tony Scott is responsible for the Mission Impossible 2 most memorable scene. Exactly. And the other thing that Scott did, which might be more important, was he directed a Saab commercial where a car raced a jet. Yeah. So that was probably pretty important too. Yeah. But
well, they originally wanted Cronenberg or even John Carpenter. They approached both of them, but like they said no, thank you.
Can you imagine?
Well, and Cruise, like it was like name the guy in the 80s. The leading man of the 80s. They had the long list was like Emilio Estevez, and
I think Cruise was the guy that they wanted.
I know that they wanted it, but they were considered. There were many people considered for,
because Cruise kept turning them down.
Yeah, because he kept being like, I don't want to do that. And so like Emilio Estevez and Patrick Swayze, Sean Penn, Rob Lowe, Michael J. Fox, Ralph Macchio, even Charlie Sheen. These were all the names that just floated around. And then finally, Cruise, I think a little bit probably had to do with the fact that, he was working with the Riddler, and the Riddler's like, go work with my brother, when they locked it down.
Or he just had the need for speed.
That too. I mean, you get him. He got in. I mean, that's the thing. I think that Bruckheimer, through this and Days of Thunder, which we'll talk about next week, he's responsible for the adrenaline junkie, and he's always had that in him. You know, since he was a kid, Cruise. But on the cinematic level, absolutely for sure. You know what I mean? Like just getting him.
Yeah.
Being like, wait, you can let me be a kid in the candy store and film this stuff, and I can get away with it. Yeah, I think that's what really kind of sold him on it. But anyway, sorry, Jay.
For sure. And obviously a huge coup there, and then the project's still in flux. Not sure it's going to get made. Michael Eisner, who I certainly know as that guy who weirdly showed up in every like Disney live event as when he was the CEO of Disney, but at the time he's
like your guy.
One of the heads of Paramount, along with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and they come begging to him like, please let us make this movie. And they're like, all right, you got one more shot at a script, and they make it, but then they're gone. But still, the movie ends up getting made on a pretty modest budget. Ryan, you said, was it $15
million in 1987?
Crazy. But you know why? Part of why it was that inexpensive, because the Navy was like, we're going to turn this into a subtle ad campaign, which is certainly something we'll talk about.
Not so subtle, but yeah.
With this movie. And Tony Scott got fired 3 times making this movie. I don't know. Because Tony Scott's vision for the film, his first thought was, this is going to be my apocalypse now.
I was going to say, this sounds very Godfather almost, where they're like going to fire him every other day, because Coppola almost got fired every day.
JD, have you seen The Hunger?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Tony Scott's vampire movie with David Bowie.
Yeah.
Very dark, very artistic. He was like, I'm going to bring that sensibility to this film. And eventually he came to kind of agree with the vision of Simpson and Bruckheimer, where it's like, this is going to be a rock and roll movie in the sky. I need a hit, and I'm going to bend the knee and make the movie that they want me to make. But so early on, he, in those opening scenes, you know, the famous kind of getting ready for the plane to take off on the aircraft carrier, that was the first thing they shot. And it was like, this is like really smoky and weird. I don't really understand what you're doing here. I think a lot of that actually ended up being in the movie, because that is one of, for me, the most memorable parts of the film. And something that is almost copied verbatim in Top Gun Maverick. But at the time they were like, this is kind of like avant-garde. What are you doing here? This looks crazy. But he did eventually kind of agree to the vision that they had for the film. And you know, it goes on and on. The Navy is a huge part of this, but they're always like, look, we're here to help you, but we're not going to change the schedule that we have for the actual military to make this movie. And allegedly at one point, Tony Scott wrote a personal check for $25,000 so that the aircraft carrier would go slightly off their planned course, so that he could get one shot of a sunset, which is just incredible.
Yeah.
And also
writing that check for one
shot. It's amazing. And then, you know, the second time he gets fired, it's because they're not super into the kind of leering shots of Kelly McGillis, and
we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Well, they're like, this is kind of weird that you're making this a Navy movie. You're kind of taking the attention away from the action and achievement of the Navy, and that's not really what they want. The power the Navy had making this movie was not insignificant. It's very, very interesting. And you just look at kind of Tony Scott's ideas while he's making this movie, where they got all of these shots of the jets sort of against the blue sky, and Tony Scott had this instinct where he's like, this does not give any sense of motion when you have no real background here, so we're going to fly the jets really low so that you can get the mountains and the hills and really give a sense of movement, which is such a brilliant piece of kind of visual storytelling. And there's plenty of other anecdotes to get into for the movie, but for me, more than anything, I find this to be an era defining film. I don't think this is necessarily a great film. I think it is a I like the film a lot. I will say that, but I don't think it's like a great film in a vacuum. It is a masterpiece of marketing and cultural understanding. As far as capturing a moment is concerned, this is one of the most brilliant movies ever made. It is, Westerns are gone. Busby Berkeley musicals are gone. New Hollywood is gone. This is, as described in the book I'm reading, Tony Scott, A Filmmaker on Fire, he describes it as the id of Ronald Reagan's America, which I think is accurate. That is the sensation I get when I watch this movie. And it's brilliant in that sense where there is very little regard for, just as far as throwing out what people want to see, it's masterful. I don't find this movie terribly emotionally impactful. I find some moments funny in a way that they weren't fully intending. I find the chemistry between Cruise and McGillis almost non-existent.
Interesting.
But I love watching this movie, and we'll talk about all the undertones and the kind of interpretation of this movie.
We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about
it. But
I
do love the experience of watching this movie. It's one of the most fun movies to watch. For the almost 2 hours you're watching this movie, it's like, yeah, I'm glad I'm not doing anything else right now. This is very, very fun. So love this movie as a piece of culture and as a experience.
Yeah. I think I'm with you, Jay, completely on that. I think it's, for me,
podcasting too long together.
Too long. God, we really need to break it up. I don't think that this is not a bad movie, and I clearly do not.
I think it's a good movie.
I think it's I think it's a good movie. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't have the personal connection like you do, JD, and everything. I didn't grow up on it. You know what I mean? I knew of it, and I think it's kind of hard. Like Jay's saying, it's hard not to know about Top Gun because it's not only just an important film for Tony Scott. It is important for perhaps the great movie star of the 21st century in Tom Cruise. And
the 21st century, the last 40 years.
Yeah, 40 years. Well, he's still it. He's been carrying it since the 80s. Like
you can go back further than the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, maybe of all time. How about just say that he's one of the greatest movie stars of all time. Period.
Oh yeah, undeniably. I think.
And you have to start somewhere. And this is at a point where, even a movie like next week that we'll talk about with Days of Thunder, by that point he's already a movie star. Because this movie makes him a movie star.
Yeah, this
year makes him a movie star because he has this, and then he's working later in the year with Scorsese and Newman and Making Color and Money. Mm-hmm. So he is co-lead on Paul Newman's Oscar-winning performance in a Martin Scorsese movie, and he's leading with a meta passing of the torch,
baton handoff, yes, of movie stardom.
And it's like, oh well, you watch that movie and you go, oh wow, really? Tom Cruise was getting the torch passed back then? Well, yeah, because that year he had the ultimate like, you want to know why I'm the next big movie star? Well, it's because I got this $360 million phenomenon right here in Top Gun, and I do think that a lot of it speaks to a lot of the movies he loves to make. It's quintessentially as much a Tony Scott movie as it is a Tom Cruise movie because he has, in a lot of ways, formulaically, good reasons and bad, chased the adrenaline, I think, of when he became a movie star, when he first had the movie-making gene in him and started listening to a lot of directors. Tony and Ridley are some, when he's talked about over the last couple of years, that were notorious in helping him learn about things behind the camera, not just his performance in front of the camera. So it's very important for that. He also is completely within this ensemble too, doing really great work. And you can just tell, even in a movie that, yes, it doesn't have the greatest script in the world, but we'll talk about that script because of its context and other things and historical factoids and fun things about it. And sure, he may not have the greatest of chemistries, but this is a movie that is completely built on the fact that this is the biggest foundational piece to modern blockbustering and filmmaking for the next 40 years. And if you don't believe me, they basically took this formula and repackaged it in a lot of ways and made Top Gun Maverick, and might do it again for Top Gun 3 if they ever want to do that. And they will, because that's just how it works.
Rooster.
Exactly. You know, and I could tell you this, watching it, it's one of those ultimate vibe movies. You just vibe it right from the beginning.
It makes you feel good.
It's like, holy shit. You're right, Jay. It's like, holy shit. It is a pure can of Americana. It is a can of beer, cold beer on a hot summer day, and you're watching
like
Top Gun.
Mainlining 1980s
America right into you. And there have been so many television shows and movies that have tried over the last couple of years to like build off of the nostalgia of the 80s and the 90s, right, guys? But if you just watch this movie, this is all you really need to know, the snapshot of what it was back then. Now, I do think,
well, it's a certain 80s, right?
It's a certain.
There were kind of two things that were happening before this that this sort of ends and starts a new era of. There's the uber sentimental Spielberg style stuff, which he was kind of moving off of. He had just done like a color purple, and he was sort of moving on to kind of this next super dramatic awardsy era of Steven Spielberg. And the other stuff was that new Hollywood. This is the same year Platoon comes out.
Yeah.
So sort of the end of that and the start of Top Gun. It's kind of like a perfect parallel.
Yeah. And he's one of the young faces of that. That's why he's put in the cavalcade cruises of all the lead actors of that era, you know, who are we going to get? Well, these are the guys. These are the cute faces that are going to carry the movies.
He's a little cute.
Yeah, he is. And this movie is funny. The action's really good for its time. Scott's doing.
I think the action really holds up. Like, forget about of its time. I think it's.
I think for its time. I mean, it's hard to do what they did, because I mean, like Cruises, even admitted they didn't have the technology like they did now to be able to do like. Why Top Gun Maverick looks so great is because we have the technology to be able to do the things we can do and shoot sequences inside planes that we just weren't able to do.
Yeah, but
in 1985,
a lot of CGI,
I still think it looks great.
No. I mean, like,
I think Top Gun looks.
I'm
awesome.
not deep. Listen,
when you have those planes going off the aircraft carrier and you're seeing the camera strapped onto the planes, it rocks. I mean,
he's talking. I'm talking about like stuff in the cockpit, things of that nature. Like it's a lot of it
definitely
is
some sound stagey stuff.
Yeah, and that's okay, because like they're also working. This is also. Weirdly enough, when you think of Top Gun, you think, oh, this is a big Hollywood production. Like, you know, no, this is really an independent film. And yeah, it's independently financed, and some of it, is definitely for the military, and that's part of it. But also, too, it's
independent film. I don't know about that.
I mean, 15 million is still
15 million and a blank check from the U.S. Navy is what they had, basically.
But it's also cruises. They're not really movie stars here. I mean, Tony Scott's last film is a controversial film that got, sort of panned by critics because of lesbian sex scenes and was not.
It is
a box office.
Not a movie without risk.
It's a big risk with everything involved, and it pays off. Is what I'm saying, and then it also defines the era too of being another thing. I mean, like, this is also the big thing about Jerry Bruckheimer, who is one of the big proponents, I think, and producers of all time.
I think he might be the first producer I ever knew about.
Yeah,
just because of his logo, and he did all
Jerry Bruckheimer production. Yeah, because he had all the action
Pirates
movies,
of the Caribbean,
every action movie that all three of us grew up on, that we kind of love, and the action directors that we kind of love, probably one way or another had Jerry Bruckheimer involved.
He is prolific.
Yes.
And then Don Simpson died. So.
It just kind of all...
The man loves cocaine.
Yes. They all kind of connect to just being this lightning in a bottle thing that end up being a phenomenon. Do I pop this on all the time like others? No, I don't. But do I respect the freaking hell out of this thing? Yeah, because this is a very important piece of filmmaking, pop culture, and for the rest of this series is built off the back, really, of
we
this
don't
movie.
have the Tony Scott.
We are not doing this series without Top Gun. So yeah, it's a good movie.
Yeah, important.
I think what's interesting about this conversation, and I say this at the risk of sounding extremely pretentious, but here we go.
Here we go.
I think what's really fun about where this conversation has gone is that it, in a weird way, points to exactly why I love this film so deeply and why I champion it the way that I do. Because when people talk about it, it typically plays out exactly how it's gone here, where we talk about the military and their involvement. You talk about the action scenes and the flying. You talk about how this film made Tom Cruise into a star, or how this film changed Hollywood into this other new era. And all of that is perfectly valid. And I don't disagree with a whole lot of it. However, I don't find any of that to be the driving force of this movie. Like, none of that interests me, at least not as much as a lot of the other stuff that I typically like to talk about with this movie.
Yeah.
All of that is great. I mean, what you guys are saying, totally agree with. And it did all of those things you guys are saying. Yet, the reason I champion this film is I think it is way more than all of that. And I think the hilarious irony in it as well is that the Navy is involved. They have resources behind this. They want to use it as a commercial of sorts. And yet the film is actively deconstructing bravado and masculinity all throughout.
You're not wrong, JD. You're not wrong.
Incredible.
No.
A lot of the machismo we see on the exterior, while it certainly being evocative, this is a sexy movie for sure. And yet all of that is a facade, because when you dig beneath that exterior, you see a lot of vulnerabilities in these characters. And that to me is what makes the rivalry between Goose and Maverick and Iceman and Slider really great. It's certainly fun and playful throughout, but you hear the concerns of Iceman about Maverick, and they aren't unfounded. Maverick proves over and over and over again that he's willing to do the wrong thing, and that makes him unpredictable and dangerous. In many ways, Iceman and Slider should be angry with Maverick. They should have their concerns. And I love that duality. From that perspective, there really is no antagonist in this film, even if they try to play Iceman as one. If anything, Maverick is the antagonist of his own story. But again, because of what he's trying to prove, and certainly I want to talk about that as well, his arrogance and pride gets in the way for Maverick. And I do find that poignant. I do think this film has a deep pathos to it. And I think that's what makes the jabbing at each other in this film, often when they are stripped down to their bare bones, if you will. And I do love that visual symbolism. Their concerns over Maverick and how that renders this deep fear and trepidation, because they know what's at stake when they are in the air. There is a reality to that. They don't want to fly into combat with someone who might abandon them. It comes from a true place of anxiety and fear. And I love how the film chews away at that bravado you see on the surface. And yet that isn't what people talk about with this movie, because the action scenes are great. It's Tom Cruise, it's the music, it's all of these other things that are really great. Again, I think this is one of the best directed films of its time, certainly of Tony Scott's career. But what makes this film great, what makes it, I think, an astounding achievement, is that you can certainly deconstruct the filmmaking of it, and all those behind the scenes elements you read, JR, it's fascinating. It truly is fascinating to read all of that, and visually, tactically, what we see on screen, it is incredibly exhilarating to watch. But what makes the film elite, I think, is that it has nuanced characters with incredible themes underneath, and the irony that while the Navy wants to use this as a commercial, Tony Scott has the opposite in mind, which I think is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I wish that was talked about more, because that really is the core of this movie, not the other stuff. But unfortunately, that was never the reputation for this movie. But I will climb in my aircraft and scream to the heavens as I fly around the world, because I that to me is what makes this film so lavishing.
Yeah. I mean, I do. This is what I miss about podcasting with JD is JD is first and foremost going into a film looking for the kind of emotional core of whatever he's watching. I definitely find this film jingoistic in a certain way. I don't think it's offensively jingoistic or anything, but and for me, I as I was watching it, I couldn't help but at this point, I think it's almost impossible to I think you're Top Gun Maverick watching this film.
Oh, that's not where I thought you were going with that. Okay.
Oh, no, but I, specifically at the end of the film where they accomplish their mission and you know, the big, you can be my wingman anytime. No, I'll be your wingman. And it's supposed to be this big moment of catharsis, but for me in that moment, it's just about very simply accomplishing a mission, and then sort of this very straightforward, very 80s idea of the main cocky protagonist and the antagonist sort of coming together and acknowledging each other for their ability and coming to some sort of friendship, which to me is not like a terribly emotionally satisfying conclusion. I especially think of the end of the film when Miles Teller and Tom Cruise are embracing each other. Makes me cry. Like, that movie makes me straight up cry. And this film to me is more or less as transgressive as Tony Scott would become and kind of was with The Hunger, and certainly would become later with stuff like Man on Fire and Domino and all sorts of other films. To me, this is him sort of doing what he is asked to do, and that is sort of reinforced by the behind the scenes drama. And you know, JD, I love this view you have where you do see so much of the Tony Scott that I love in this film. The Tony Scott that I love that is in this film is the aesthetic stuff. This is, I listened to an interview with Joseph Kaczynski where he said,
don't see the irony that what's happening underneath the surface of these characters is totally antithetical to those aesthetics. Like, you don't
I would say this is
and I'm asking that sincerely. I'm not trying to
I would say
like,
tonally.
No, I mean, like, I mean, Jay, I'm not going to try to cut you off here and speak for you.
No, go ahead.
But I would say that there's a kind of a middle ground between it, because Jay, you are right. There is this pressure that Tony Scott has to feel throughout this entire production with a literal military boot on his back. It's not the same as making The Hunger. It's not the same as making Days of Thunder, which is the next film we're going to talk about, or the films in between. He has literally the most pressure he's ever at this time ever had to face. And he doesn't have as much cachet because this movie gives him the cachet, right? Like, the end product is what it is. But in the film itself, and I think this is what you're getting to, JD, if this is a pure propaganda movie, or at least a recruitment video, then it is a poor one at best at times too, because if I was
the Navy was,
I know
they
that they're
literal Navy booths outside of the screenings to recruit.
I know, but
I could consider that a misinterpretation of the material.
No, I think like the idea of it is that it's taken I think that the idea of it taking a life on its own is very fascinating because of the fact that it is Top Gun to me is a good Rorschach test to what Americans want to see within their own sort of narrative. So if you want to see an emotional, really cathartic film about this man struggling with his identity as, someone trying to prove himself, which is very much what Miles Teller has to do in Maverick. That's very much what Maverick literally has to do here. If you're about the loss of a very close, almost essentially a family member, and going through PTSD, going through it within a blockbuster filmmaking template, and I think that you can have that. If you want to see a cool action film too, and if you want to be like, man, I might sign up for the military, that's one thing. If you also want to see for a lot of people, a very sultry, sexy film that has a lot of imagery towards different interpretations of what kind of sexuality and what kind of
it is so funny.
Perversion that this movie is. I mean, it is a Rorschach test to, I believe, the 1980s and the evolution. If you're going to talk about it, and being in the kind of the Reagan era, I mean, it is kind of fascinating. And I know that's like the Tarantino sort of whole, like, that Top Gun is very much a gay movie. But then when you watch it in that lens, you're like, yeah, it kind of is like that. And like the military, it sounds funny and you can make fun of it all you want, but then it's people's interpretation of what it is. So that's why I think people hold this so near and dear. It's everything that we're talking about. It's JD's emotional core. It's the aesthetics. It's what you're carrying into it.
Three interpretations of this movie. For me, I'll be honest, this for me is Tony Scott going into commercial director mode and being like, I am going to give the audience exactly what they want. And from that perspective, again, I think this movie is masterful in that regard. I think aesthetically, he's bringing in things that audiences may not be accustomed to, but sort of ingratiating them into the culture. And a lot of what he's doing here from an editing perspective, from a visual perspective, it would become so mainstream. But I think his ability to sort of make audiences understand that this is what they want is the real achievement of the movie. And he is being like, I am going to give you the movie that you want, that I think the audiences will want, occasionally at the expense of his true artisanship from a storytelling perspective. But I love it for the Tony Scott technical elements, even if I think it is lacking some of the Tony Scott storytelling elements that I will come to straight up adore later on in his career. And honestly, I adore in The Hunger. But I love that we have three very different interpretations of the movie. It's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really interesting. I do think this is the best of Tony Scott because you get the best of both. It is lavish filmmaking at its finest, especially in terms of commercial filmmaking. And I don't think there's a better told narrative in his filmography, especially when you consider the astounding irony at its core. Maybe Tony Scott is giving audiences what they want, especially those that are aspiring to be Navy pilots. And I love the irony that while you might think that this is what you want from a thematic symbolism perspective, he's absolutely giving you the opposite of that.
Yeah, because if you really just what you're saying, JD, if you're following Maverick's story here, point for point, and he's supposed to be the person that's supposed to get him in the door. Like, that's a hard life. That's a hard road. You know what I mean? At the end of it, you're like,
a hard road, but the beginning of the road and the end of the road are very traditional and crowd pleasing.
No, they are. But if you really break it down, it's like you're going to lose a lot of friends. You're going to lose people. You're going to lose your loved ones. You're going to be alone.
It's not Man on Fire.
It's not Man on Fire. But I would say that, like, if your goal is to, to me, when I was, and I think the perfect example of somebody like this, and when I was thinking about Tony Scott in a movie like this and working within confines, because he's working within certain structures, certain things he has to do and can't do, and he has a
set of rules that he has to abide by with this movie.
It felt like when we were years ago, when we did a series over at InSession Film, it was like when we were discovering the films of Howard Hawks, and how Howard Hawks had to subvert a lot of the studio's
He literally has the
rules.
Hays Code to do.
Yeah, he has the Hays Codes and literal restraints that are also written by essentially the government on what we can and cannot do.
He was a sneaky boy.
And he's pushing the envelope here. The idea of the sort of just straight on the surface things that he's saying here, or what people theorize and fantasize and pick apart and create within there too. If any of that is true, like an ounce of that is true, right? If this is a subtextual film for repressed homosexuality, if this is a sultry adult film, in the middle of it, because there's literally just them trying to get after one another the entire first half of this movie. And that can be great, but look at the cost and benefits of it. It turns into a tragedy at times. And literally in the back half of that movie, that whole thing is a tragedy. It does not become about between really him and Iceman at all in the second half of that film. It gets away from this competitive rivalry.
It's the hero's journey, right?
It is. But the hero's journey at the end of it would be to fly off and be to go and go to the next mission. It would be a Mission Impossible movie. He'd go to the next mission, he'd save the world, and he'd do it over and over. And he's like, no, I think I'm just going to teach. And I'm going to teach people to do.
Yeah, that's fine, but he has the choice to do what he wants.
Yeah, but the choice is, instead of going to the next mission, he can go pick wherever he wants. Because I want to teach and not go to the next mission, not be ice and go to the next mission. I want to teach because I need to make sure that what happened doesn't happen again. And it's actually, when you think about it, he doesn't really technically learn that in between, and he has to really relearn that in Maverick, and that's what makes Maverick so great, is that
all you like Maverick more than this movie, by the way? I do.
JD, do you like Maverick more than this, or are they kind of on the same level?
I kind of see them complementary to each other.
I think so.
Because there's another element here I want to talk about that I think is pivotal to Maverick and how that plays out, especially given how I see it. Because I don't see this movie as a hero's journey. I mean, it is that a little bit, but I think fundamentally this is really more a movie about grief as it relates to Maverick. And watching it as an adult really changed my perspective on it, especially since becoming a parent. You really start to see how much of an emotional core this film really has. And I would argue there's genuine nuance here as it relates to Maverick and what's driving him. His recklessness at times is certainly rooted in ego and a competitiveness to be the best, but mostly it's grounded in Maverick trying to prove something. His father was a Navy pilot who was shot down during Vietnam, and there's this false narrative around his death that Maverick has always had to fight against. And the film pauses several times, not once, several times, to reflect on this and give Maverick a sense of eagerness to find the truth, or at least honor his father and what he's doing. One of my favorite scenes in the film is this tender moment that comes off the heels of Viper talking about Maverick's aggressiveness and how it could end up getting him killed, which offers up some great dramatic irony, or perhaps foreshadowing. When Maverick finds himself alone, he pulls out a photo of himself and his father when he was a little kid, and he just stares at it. It's very subtle. It's introspective. He's just reflecting on it, and it's genuinely poignant. There's another great scene earlier in the film after he and Goose were chewed out for a tower flyby they did after one of the dogfighting exercises. When Goose visits Maverick,
you gotta buzz the tower.
You gotta buzz the tower.
Exactly. But he reiterates to Mav that he understands why Mav has something to prove, because of who his dad was and the reputation that comes with it. But Goose also has a family to take care of, and he can't blow this, to which Mav replies, "You're the only family I got." And that line is so crucial. It's absolutely vital, because we also learn about Mav's mother, or not just his father, but we also learn about his mother who died when he was young. So Goose is everything to Maverick, and the film does a great job of establishing the relationship and how Goose fills a void in Maverick as it relates to his parents never having any sort of significant presence in his life. The film never loses sight of that, and it certainly reiterates a lot of the ego-ness in Maverick and a lot of the choices that he makes in this film, which is why, again, he is the antagonist of this film. It's not Iceman. Iceman is in this, it's brought
I can see
up
that
as this antagonist, but he's not. Everything that Iceman says is objectively true. You keep leaving your wingman. You're dangerous in the skies. Yeah. That's all Iceman says throughout this film. Nothing he says is untrue.
Honestly,
Maverick having to overcome that ego, which is rooted in grief, and heightened all the more because of what happens to Goose. He's the one that has to overcome those boundaries. It's and that to me is why I do tear up at that ending moment, because it's justice for Iceman in a lot of ways, but it's really Maverick finding closure for maybe the first time in his life.
Yeah, just kiss already.
Yeah, just kiss. They get so close.
The Val Kilmer performance in this movie is crazy.
The fact that he didn't mostly want to do this, and he was
he didn't want to do it. He was under contract with Paramount. Yeah. No, he straight up was like, I don't
want to do it.
But he was under contract.
He didn't have a choice. But then he's so good in this movie too. And
he's crazy in this. I mean, like the bite, it's
like.
I mean, like I can get why. I
think he's the most homoerotically charged.
You think? They're like right in each other's face. They're like trying like
physically.
Like he's like literally like, come on, come back and play one more round of volleyball. Don't
go. He's got a lot of mannerisms.
I mean, I love that. I mean, I have to bring this up because I've been wanting to bring it up and I've kind of subtly brought it up, but I think it's hilarious that what is this? It comes from this film called Sleep With Me, where Tarantino's playing a character in the film.
very famous,
that Top Gun's one of the funniest scripts ever written.
No, he says it's one of the greatest scripts ever written.
Yeah. And he says, it's, the guy's just like, it's just about a bunch of guys on, that are pent up.
Two men falling in love with each other.
Yeah, it's about like, no, and they're like, they're on edge with one another and they really want to like get there and they want to be with each other, but then like Kelly McGinnis is there and she's heterosexuality and she's like trying to perverse Maverick into the other side of it.
That is a mild stretch.
I mean, like to be fair, if you agree or disagree with that, that's fine. But there is the undisputed proof of after they have lunch and she's kind of like seducing him to the dark side and she's never done this before and all that stuff. The next scene we see her cut to is she's literally dressed like one of them. And like the aviators and everything.
That is a Navy mandate, my friend.
I'm telling you, it's like, damn, she's dressed just like him. You know what I mean? She's his height. Everything.
She is, but that was mandated by the U.S. military.
And
she was in a lot of shorter skirts and sort of this California fantasy thing that Tony was doing, and the Navy was like, haha, I don't think you should make this movie anymore. And so they put her in the bomber jacket.
One of the first times they fired him.
Yeah, one of the first times they were like,
that was the second time they fired
Number 3. This is like a good stand-up routine. Like, and the third time they fired me on, like when you start having drinks with somebody and they're like, I've got 5 stories. It's like Jay in what is the movie? Benjamin Button, where the guy's like, I've been struck by lightning 7 times in my life. Yeah. And you see that throughout the film. Would have loved a movie or like a conversation with Tony Scott where he's just like, and the 4th time they fired me
it's out there.
Was because there weren't enough raisins at craft services, and I was furious.
It is. I mean, it is sort of in many ways accidentally this.
Yeah, it's
charged movie.
I mean,
for sure.
Because
the way that Tony Scott described the volleyball scene was he was like, I'm trying to capture the female gaze.
Yeah.
But as a straight man, he was like, the female gaze is he can only view through a male lens. So it's like, I'm gonna have a volleyball game with a bunch of shirtless, oiled up dudes. The only people who are going to be watching the game are dudes. Because it's like, because he's like, that's what women like, right? It's a bunch of like hot dudes.
Well, to be fair, he's coming off of making a very titillating scene in The Hunger, right, with Catherine Deneuve,
which is, I would say, elementally from the male gaze.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, okay, he's doing the inverse, literally in the next movie for a movie that's being financed by the United States military. Like, if that's not like ultimate, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge a little bit.
Love it.
I mean, JD, you're kind of right. It's like he's literally being like, you want me to make a recruitment video? Well, there's a bunch of sexed up, oiled up, pent up guys that are all trying to do a dick measuring contest. I mean, like, it's
the definition of traditional masculinity is not in this movie.
No, because like
in pockets,
but it is at times. I mean,
at times. I mean, it's like
it deconstructs that totally.
I mean, it's just like sitting here and just it's like, you know, you can have all the pageantry of the Olympics, but we know what really goes on at the Olympic Village. Like, come on now. Like, it's like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's there. It's not there. And I think that's what's kind of great about it. It's like, and I think the movie is winking at least, if not the characters, definitely Tony Scott is winking at and saying, I'm getting away with this a little bit there.
With y'all on
I think he is. I think
he is too.
I think he's getting away with. I think he's getting away with stuff.
I don't even think that
it's like Jay. I'm telling you, it's like Howard Hawks when he or even Billy Wilder, where Billy Wilder's making these really entertaining films, and like those guys are skirting the line, they're towing the line, and also if I got fired 4 times from something,
3 times,
I thought you said 4.
3.
Oh, okay. If I got fired 3 times,
rule of 3s.
They brought me back on the 4th time. At that point, yeah, I'd give you what you want, but I'm also gonna do it within my way, and I'm gonna also do it in ways too where you're like, oh yeah, isn't this great? Like bunch of dudes just playing sports, but really it's a bunch of dudes who want to bone each other. You know what I mean? Like
that is so.
I don't know.
It's a little bit of both, baby.
No, that is so accidental.
I would.
And everybody has said as such.
Yeah, I don't.
Accidental. Okay.
I don't know if I would go quite that far, but I do.
I did.
I know you did.
Yeah.
But I do think they're depicted in a way that complements the vulnerability that's really there in those characters. So either way, I think
the vulnerability of masculinity I can get behind.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's mostly what I'm referring to.
I mean,
to argue the sexual undertones as Ryan did.
I'm just telling you, there's a moment where he does.
Have.
I'm telling you, there's all the like the close-ups and the way they get close to one another and the way they whisper things and these guys. I'm like, I see it. That's the greatest thing I've ever seen.
What about the way that Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis kiss each other? That's weird.
Yeah, that's also another thing where it's like, I don't think people kiss like that. It's a little weird.
No, but that's just some stylization.
It's almost like you know what I kept thinking of and I know JD and Jay, you guys are gonna get mad at me, but every time I see that sex thing, I think of MacGruber. You guys ever seen MacGruber?
Oh, that movie, that scene is absolutely.
That is exactly what it is, and it's like, and now ever since I've seen MacGruber, I can't take this sex scene seriously because
it is supposed to be a pretty hot.
It's supposed, yeah, because it's.
I think it's I think McGillis and Cruise.
I think they're not. I don't think that they're that bad. I think that they're okay.
I don't mind it.
But I think that the scene and sort of the way in which he shoots it, it's like it's a little awkward.
Well, I heard actually on the podcast, the Rewatchables, they said that was shot afterwards, and the reason they shot it the way they did is because whether it was for another movie or whatever else, they looked different. So they had to backlight it so that you didn't see how different they looked in the foreground.
Oh, so they like moved on to another movie and they came back and shot it?
Necessary, yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
It was
a reshoot. It's super interesting just the way in which it's.
Well, it's very. It's very The Hunger.
Yeah, it is.
Beer curtains and backlighting,
dark shadows, and the shadows
almost
are
German expressionistic.
Yeah, again, Again, not what you would expect in a 1980s action film.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree. Aesthetically, I think this thing is an achievement in a lot of ways.
You're just like this dude's a horn dog a little bit.
San Diego fantasy.
Speaking of intimacy, can I talk about another scene in this film that I love that I think is quite intimate, a different kind of intimacy, but again, I think another great example of how this film deconstructs traditional masculinity. And it also points back to Iceman and Val Kilmer, who was just absolutely terrific in this film. But one of the best scenes in the film, as far as I'm concerned, and it's a moment that just doesn't get talked about enough, is this exchange that he has with Maverick in the aftermath of Goose's death, where he approaches Maverick, but he doesn't, for the first time in the film, he doesn't use his call sign. He calls him by his real name.
Calls him Mitchell.
And it's this great moment, this great example that for Iceman, his rivalry with Maverick was never founded in ego or pride, but rather in Maverick's risky choices as a pilot. I love that moment. It's not about anything but the humanity between those two characters because of the tragedy they had just experienced. And by calling him Mitchell, I think it says a lot about Iceman. And honestly, I think it's maybe the most intimate scene in the entire film. Like the way he says Mitchell, like there's a soft spoken quality to it that I think is deeply poignant. It's fantastic.
It's such a short scene. Because it is so short, I almost feel like it's utilitarian. I agree with you that specific choice is very powerful, but it is a very short.
I mean, this movie is trying to do a raw
anything more than that.
Yeah, but I think the movie is
calls him Mitchell. I think gives so much weight, like to prolong that. I don't know if you needed to do anything more than that.
I mean, it's no different. Like Maverick, I think is like a 220 film, so it adds like 30 minutes. So you get a little bit of extra time. Obviously, it's like shoehorning in the Jennifer Connelly stuff and a bunch of new stuff. But then, like when you think about that, it's I mean, there's moments where Maverick in Top Gun Maverick is looking at Miles Tell's Rooster, and he drops the call sign there too, to get him to either stop or to get him to listen.
The mirroring, I think this is the first time I'd watched this movie since I've seen Maverick, and the mirroring stuff is way more.
Yeah, I wouldn't
than I remembered.
I won't say it is. I mean, I think mirroring is good. I think that I don't think it's a bad thing, because like mirroring can also then be another. I'm not saying that you're saying this, Jay, so don't think that I'm saying this. But for some people, like
don't
mirroring,
speak for me.
Sorry, me too. But mirroring can be like, well, you're just telling the same story, but that's not always the case, because the in games and the outcomes and the characters, it's familiar, but then it's also life also has familiar, and we are also like,
well, that's a movie about legacy.
Well, it is also about like Maverick is a character that is repeating his mistakes over and over again, refusing to grow up, refusing to move on from his rank. You know what I mean? Like his stubbornness. And by the end of Maverick, he finally is able to fully let go of the mistakes he made in this film and the mistakes he's made in between in Maverick, because he makes an enormous mistake with Rooster there, that Goose wouldn't approve of at all, or even that if Goose would want his own son there, but that's also not for him to say. It's not his father. You know what I mean? And all that layered there within that story, like that's why it's a damn good movie, because when you watch them back to back with one another, the mirroring works perfectly to then wrap up a person's 40-year story. And so that's why when they are now talking about potentially wanting to do another one, it's like, please God, don't, because you've done such a good job at kind of wrapping this all within these characters. And I know it's cool.
At the very least, it feels like Maverick's story is over.
Yeah, like I don't know how you continue
But I don't know how you do another Top Gun movie without Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, how do you do another Indiana Jones movie without Harrison Ford? But we're gonna fucking get one of those eventually, and it's gonna suck. You know what I mean?
Or maybe not after his.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, Dial of
Destiny did.
Well, I mean,
Indiana Jones's time might have come and gone.
If they just didn't do all that CGI,
Top Gun's time has clearly not.
I don't think Top Gun has. I mean, like, time's going to tell next year how far Mission's going to go, because Mission didn't do well. So, I mean,
certainly not as well as they would have liked.
But also, there is doing Top Gun 40 years or 35 years or whatever. Like, is that just lightning in a bottle? Is audiences going to want to see it again? Are you going to be able to pull it off? Like,
I want to see it again if you make a good movie. But kind of the lesson from Top Gun Maverick was like, make a good movie based on something that people know, and they will go see it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Star Wars The Force Awakens sort of thing too, right? Just make a good movie and people will go to it. I mean, that's a little bit more agreeable, I think, of content.
It's also just like something that I wouldn't say
it's a little safer,
ravenous for a Top Gun sequel.
No,
they were ravenous for a Star Wars.
No, I think the thing is that they had seen maybe there had been the prequels and
Force Awakens was a sure thing. Top Gun Maverick was not a sure thing.
No, it wasn't a sure thing, but you did have it be a generational thing, where a new generation's into it.
Blade Runner, right?
Yeah, but like not to the same extent, because Blade Runner was not the hit that Maverick was. You know what I mean? Like we love Blade Runner because of what Blade Runner 2049 is, what those movies are, those endless cuts, because Ridley just loves a new cut every 5 years.
It was insane to give Blade Runner 2049 the budget they gave it. Just absolutely ludicrous.
It was.
I know.
And it's that movie is that really is a cult classic. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like Alien, where you're like, where you can just have James Cameron go into a boardroom, write a $sign on the end and say aliens, and then it turns out to be just fine. You know what I mean? Or
everyone knows the iconography of Alien. Not everyone knows the iconography of Blade Runner,
because it's more complex.
It's not a cultural landmark in the same way that Alien is.
All I have to do is put an alien to your face or have it come out of your chest, and I know what that is.
Difficult movie, Blade Runner.
And I think, like with Top Gun, hey, put people in. And the other thing too is about Maverick. The pandemic built it up.
That's the big thing. That's what I wanted to bring up next, because I think the film, if it came out in 2020 and the pandemic never happened, I do think there's a world where it's more Blade Runner 2049 than what it actually was.
Oh, you don't think it's a hit?
I don't. Well, I think it could have been. I don't know. I think it's a little bit.
You think it would have been like, oh, this is a good movie, and
because like Top Gun, as you guys noted at the beginning of this, I mean, it was a big hit, but that was in 1986. I mean, we're 30 some odd 40 years later. I just don't know if it would have hit the zeitgeist in the same way. But when the pandemic comes and you're starved for something good or just to be out in the world at all, and this film delayed and delayed and delayed, I think people were just desperate to go see something good, and it was, to Jay's point, make something good and people will go see it. I think that's a big part of it as well, but I think people were starved and wanted to get to the theaters as well. And
it is the definition of the movie that saved cinema, right?
Yeah,
that is a movie where the people who aren't movie freaks, I have not met a single not weird person who is not like, that movie rocked. Like, that movie was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was Maverick was, or not Maverick, just Top Gun was the #1 movie at the box office of its year. And then it's a year where you got Crocodile Dundee, you got Karate Kid 2, Aliens, like Jay said, Color Purple, you got like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like, it was a big deal.
It was a big old honking deal.
Yeah. And I mean, I also know, I mean, JD, this too, like Cruise going to Comic-Con with the trailer, having that trailer forever, then pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. Mm-hmm. Most of those films that got pushed like that, they ended up becoming a hit because, yes, people really wanted to go back to the movies. It was perfect in that.
Unhinged.
It was like Unhinged. But like also people too, it came out at the perfect time because it was at the time of all this schlock, and no offense,
just leftover.
Well, it was like
crap.
It was like the Lightyear movie, and
they wanted that thing to work.
Thor 4, and these movies that like in a normal year would make a crap ton of money, but people were like, I need a reason to get out of the house.
The box office was not back.
No, like it just
exactly.
no, like the only
and it made 1.5 billion
because like the first Dune, like
made the first Barbie. I mean, it was ludicrous.
I mean, the only movie that had proven that people wanted to go to the box office at the time, to go to the movies, that was good at the box office, was Spider-Man No Way Home. And that was because of a promise of all these internet rumors about all your favorite Spider-Mans are going to be in one place at one time. Go see this movie. And so it got all, and it was the last.
I think I hate that movie. I think I hate it.
But I think it's also the last time Marvel really like fully had the juice, right? You know what I mean? I mean, yeah, maybe.
I think it's great.
With the Guardians movie, maybe last year too, but that was just because it was the last of the.
It was big, but that didn't have quite the cultural impact.
Yeah, but like even still, like the first Dune movie came out in October of 22.
Well, there's no way to know how that really.
It is really no. I mean, it is because now
did well.
It did well, but now Dune 2 is done.
But it was day and date.
Yeah,
Max.
But now we know that
then Dune, it was HBO Max.
Yes, but now we know that it was legitimate because Dune 2 is the biggest movie of the year. Yeah. So it did get and through. Ryan it just got through, and right. I'm agnostic about it. Man, I saw a film today that I think is way better than it from the same studio. Thank you very much. Go see Furiosa.
Garfield.
Go see Furiosa, please.
The Garfield movie.
It's kind of actually more weird and wild that we have a Mad Max prequel than a Dune sequel, because you can at least understand that they wanted to make a franchise with Dune. They've got all these hot celebrities. I'm going to make a sequel or a prequel. I'm sorry, to a movie that didn't make any of its budget back, won a bunch of Oscars, and I'm not going to have any of the stars from that movie return.
Yeah, but when you just made 3,000 Years a Longing,
I was just going to say, and then
you want.
I was just going to say, and that movie exists as well. Yeah. But you know what's funny? I know JD probably doesn't care about this aspect, but the difference between Maverick and actually he might, because JD and Jay might put up a fight and hate me for this.
Oh, let's do it.
The difference between Maverick and the original Top Gun is Tony Scott's direction, because I think that Joseph Kosinski's direction is fine in that film.
I think he directs that movie very
well. I think that is it,
because I think he has the template of Tony Scott.
See, I think that movie is more of a committee, and a damn good committee.
It does not have the visual signature that the original Top Gun does.
And that's where I give the original Top Gun more credit, is because it does have his decades-long distinctive flair vision.
They literally invented new cameras for Top Gun Maverick.
I know. I said that earlier.
The plane stuff in that movie is just astounding.
They didn't have it, but also then too, like, man, Kosinski's making that really expensive Formula One movie, right? He's the helmer of that Brad Pitt $300 million thing.
I'm looking forward to it.
That thing's gonna be wild.
I liked what was his Chris Hemsworth movie?
Oh, the one like Spiderhead? Is that what it was called?
Spiderhead. The movie was okay.
Am I wrong about that? Am I right?
No, I think that's right. Spiderhead. Miles Teller, Chris Hemsworth.
Do you remember that one, JD? Spiderhead?
I don't think that I liked it.
It is astonishing that I got that right. That is dead on what it was called. It is a Netflix movie. I remember not liking that movie at all.
Yeah, I don't think I liked it very much.
But I liked Hemsworth, because Hemsworth
was great.
Hemsworth is good. Yeah.
Is that guy the best Chris?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's the best.
Who are the Chris's again? Evans, Pratt, Hemsworth, Pine.
Yeah.
I'll go Hemsworth. Yeah.
And if you want to add a fifth, I always add Messina.
I
love Messina.
Seen Air?
Yeah. I mean, if you've seen Air, you know Messina. Big deal.
I think I nominated him for supporting actor.
You should have. I think Hemsworth's in the clubhouse right now, followed by Evans.
Yeah. I love.
I've got.
Hemsworth.
I'm selling my Evans stuff.
Are you selling Evans? He's about to do the new Celine Song movie.
I'm selling.
I wouldn't sell it just yet, buddy. It's him, Pedro Pascal, Dakota Johnson.
Look at his filmography over the last 5 years.
Yeah, but it's
hit or miss.
It is hit or miss, but he's also like he's gonna make
miss or miss.
I think he's gonna do. I mean, he's making a good choice working with the director of Past Lives for his next film.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good call. I think you'll be like,
maybe you're buying low.
Maybe you should hold. How about you hold?
You know what? It's at an all-time low. Probably a bad time to sell. You're right.
Yeah, it's probably a bad time to sell. Yeah. What was the movie that you loved last year with him and Anna de Armas? Was it Ghosted?
Oh yeah, Ghosted. Yeah, that was
my God. I didn't even see it.
What was the Pharma movie with Emily Blunt? What was that movie called?
Which one?
I skipped that one too.
I watched it. The pharmacy drug movie with Emily Blunt.
Oh, like
what was that called?
Was like
I love that Jay's willing to put himself on the line like that.
The Pill Popper? I don't know what it is.
It was like not called The Pill Popper.
I don't remember what it called.
Pill Popper.
That's what I thought it was. Pain Hustlers. That's what it was.
Yeah,
I was close.
Yeah, I will say that one didn't have much of a cultural footprint.
I remember this is a true story. They tried to get me to see that at Toronto, and I was like, I don't know if I can do it. It's just because it was getting bad buzz.
I'll watch a dang Netflix movie.
And they were shout out to Eric. He was like, "You want to just go have like a good dinner?" And instead of going to that, I was like, "Yeah." And then we had like a good dinner can outweigh a bad movie any day of the year.
I've seen many worse films, but it was pretty.
It seemed just. Oh my God! Don't tell
Unfrosted, one of my rare half stars on Letterboxd.
I saw.
I saw any of those.
I saw a half-star movie.
What's that?
I saw Argyle.
Oh, see, I'm a mild Argyle.
Yeah, I know you are. You're a madman, both of you, saying it about Argyle. Is there anything else? Let's get back on topic. Is there anything else you guys want to mention about Top Gun? Any fun stuff you want to mention? Anything like JD?
How about the exact opposite of fun? A guy died making this movie.
That is true.
Jay, we're like, hey, you want to talk about this? No, like literally, is it really? Are you for real?
No, yeah, pilot died. They never even found his body.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was saying to you guys before we started recording about Fury Road was like, how did nobody die making that movie?
I feel like that is kind of a not talked about element of this movie.
Well, that's like, I mean, it's like
Ryan, you didn't even know.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about
playing that flatline.
I didn't know that a couple of years ago, Jay. You told me one director killed somebody on set, or like their movie killed somebody. John Landis, I think.
You're talking about the John Landis one. Oh, yeah, the John Landis one is very, very.
I know it's infamous, but I didn't know about that until you told me about that, and I didn't. Yeah. I did my own research. Proves out Jay's wrong and he's in the libels.
The John Landis one is egregious.
Yeah, it's bad. It's
this one was just a
terrible accident,
nightmarish incident that was not. It was sort of a.
Was it preventable?
Goose Maverick situation where it was like nobody was really at fault. It just sort of
happened. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well,
it is the argument of was it worth doing in the first place if somebody might have died for a movie?
Mm-hmm.
Not so much.
I don't know, but it was nobody was put. It wasn't even like in The French Connection where it was like I knew I was putting people in a great amount of unnecessary danger filming the chase scenes in French Connection. This was like, this is one of the greatest stunt pilots in the world. He's done this a million times and it just went wrong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's terrible.
It was tragic. Yeah.
Terrible. No, I did not know that, Jay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I mean,
but the film is dedicated to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I was wondering who that was at the end. Yeah.
So
there you go. Anything else you guys want to mention?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I want to reiterate because I know I talked a lot about the emotional core of the film and why I think it's so vividly underrated. But it's not that I don't want to talk about the film's visual appeal or the direction of it. I just feel like that's talked about so much that I don't want to spend time on it.
Hey, but this movie is important to you, and you're just saying why it is, JD. That's okay.
Yeah, but I do immensely enjoy the direction. I truly think it's Tony Scott's best directed movie. I love the visuals here. I think a lot of the effects work still holds up incredibly well. I think it is an arresting film to watch visually. Like that opening sequence is unmatched. Incredible way to start the movie. The only stuff that doesn't work for me as much is some of the dogfighting stuff at the end. But you know, it's like it's the end of the film, and they're wanting to get those dramatic stakes.
It's very Hollywoodified. I find it dramatically engaging, but yeah.
Like the aerial stuff is fine. It's a little wonky at times, but like I'm not too bothered by it. I still think all of the flying scenes here are fantastic, and I love how all of that is shot and rendered. Like I think from a visual perspective, the film is incredible. Like I do really, really like the film, and I enjoy that. So I think, you know, again, the reason I want to spend time on the other stuff is, you know, the difference between this being fun popcorn entertainment and a massive hit in the 80s because of all of the performances and the direction and all of that stuff on the surface, which is really great. But I think this film is genuinely one of the best films of the 80s. Yeah. And the reason it gets there is for
that's
all
awesome. I love that.
I wanted to talk about. So I just wanted to emphasize that. But yeah, I mean, I love that opening sequence at the beginning of the film, and not just how it opens with the music and the stuff on the carrier, but the whole cougar sequence I think is fantastic. I love the tension there. Like all of that is handled extremely well. And the other thing too that we didn't really talk about much, but I want to emphasize Tom Cruise's performance here. I think is astounding. It's very restrained. It's surprisingly quite stoic. It relies a lot on his facial tics and mannerisms to convey that emotion. And I love how you couple that with Tom Cruise being at the peak of his sex appeal in many ways. It's great. I think that's why I love Maverick in this film as I do. Anthony Edwards, I love his high-spirited exuberance.
He's in this great. Film as well. He's a bolt of energy in this movie. For
bolt
God's
of energy. He's so great comedic timing. Love his dynamic with Tom Cruise as well. So, I love this film.
Jay, you know who I love in this movie? Tom Skerritt.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
I'm a Skerritt guy through and through.
His presence is awesome. He takes advantage of all of his limited screen time. I'll tell you what. You know who has been mentioned not one time in a positive light? Kelly McGillis.
By you?
I don't mind her.
I don't mind her in this movie.
No, but nobody's brought her up at all.
Right? Well, no, I mean, no, you've brought her up negatively.
The middle chunk of the movie is
it Kelly McGinnis,
Tom Cruise concentrated. Yeah.
I think that she's good.
Why does Tom Cruise go to her house to take a shower?
Because he
he didn't take a shower now, did he? So he
went to her house to go to dinner for the date.
She can't smell him and be like, maybe you should. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, she probably could, but she was more hungry than he stunk.
Man, that's got to be then a really bad smelling dinner. Because, good Lord, like, what is she serving him? Like herring or something? For God's sakes, like,
yeah, I don't know.
Also, here's the biggest question.
Oh, here we go.
You don't think Goose's family would want his tags?
Yeah, he throws them in the ocean. That's not his to throw. That's ridiculous. I was like, give that to the kid. To do. Give it to his kid.
Maybe it's not insane in the context of Maverick, because what do we know about Maverick 30 years later?
Making bad decisions.
Hides a lot of the truth from Rooster and doesn't want him to go up and fly.
See, Tom Cruise is just laying the groundwork for the sequel.
Just saying.
He's a time traveler.
It is an insane thing to do.
The way he just like kind of like jumps up in the air.
That's where he made the decision. I'm not going to let Rooster do.
It's like a tiny little throw into the ocean too. Like it's like the end of Titanic. Like Titanic's still from this. I don't know. It's just like, he's like, here, get out of here. No, I love. I think Kilmer's very good. Obviously, he's just like all up in his face. Like the meathead that's alongside. That's his
guy.
His guy.
Oh, what's the coolest call sign?
Man.
Oh, man, what is the good call sign? See, I like Viper. I think Viper's cool.
Viper's cool.
I think Iceman is kind of.
Iceman's pretty dope.
Iceman, yeah.
I like Iceman.
Yeah, I like
one of those two probably.
I like Slider.
Slider's good.
Just as a name. That's I think the radar instructor.
I like how nerdy Merlin is.
Oh, what would our call sign be?
Mm.
Oh, JD, do you have a call sign for yourself? Did you already think that ahead?
I used to have one when I was younger, but I don't know if I like it anymore. I would probably change it now.
I think my wife would say Bigfoot.
Cynic.
She just said it and she just texted me because she's in the other room. She just heard me say it. So Bigfoot. Yeah.
My call sign would be Cynic.
Cynic? Yeah. Hashtag Mr. Cynical. Yeah.
Call sign Pathos.
Call sign Pathos.
Crybaby, maybe. That's fine.
Mr.
Crybaby. That's pretty good.
Hashtag Tears.
I'm trying to think what would an actually
JD Tears. There you go. Oh man, what is a good one for Jay? Jay, you would be
Stud Muffin.
I was gonna say Tiger. You know what I mean? You could just be Tiger.
Tiger.
Auburn Tigers.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to help you out, buddy.
Yeah. War Eagle.
War Eagle.
War Eagle would actually be pretty.
Actually, be really good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Codename War Eagle. That's pretty good.
I mean, that's pretty good. It's very appropriate too, Joe.
Yeah.
I also like.
But you would have to. You would have to fly.
Hangman's pretty good.
If you couldn't do the Tomcat though, you'd have to do the F-15 if your call sign is.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Man, that would be good. Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
And anything else you guys want to mention about Top Gun, or anything else you didn't get to say about Maverick? It's gonna be the last time.
It's just so much sweat.
So much sweat. Which is better, the beach volleyball scene or the double football scene in Maverick? The beach.
I would have to say. I mean, the volleyball scene is more iconic.
Yeah,
they're playing off of that scene.
Yeah.
So you gotta go.
But Jay, but one has like, I almost said Imagine Dragons. It has like what, 21 Pilots?
No. It's not 21 Pilots. It's
Chainsmokers.
No, it's the One Republic.
One Republic. That's right. One has One Republic and the other one doesn't.
Maybe I should.
I actually like that song a lot.
It's really good.
From the Maverick one.
I love how Cruz saw the dailies of that.
Boys.
And they were like, they thought they were done, and so they just started eating because like they had been like, you know, working out and essentially not been, and like they were sculpting themselves for that scene. And like 2 days later, Cruz is like, no,
that's how that stuff always works.
He's like, no, we got to reshoot this all over again. And they were all like literally in between takes, like lifting and not drinking water and just like, you know, trying to dehydrate themselves to get to like that point.
I got a fun making of for the music.
For which one? For this?
For Top Gun. Yeah.
For Kenny Loggins?
So they were like, Bruckheimer and Simpson we're going to MTV-ify this. So they had
no shit.
They composed some songs beforehand, and they had, well, originally actually they had hundreds of artists send them music to potentially put into the movie. They didn't like any of it. Then they had a composer put together Take My Breath Away and Danger Zone. And then Kenny Loggins was like, hey, I know how I'll get this job. I'll give you another song playing with the boys. And then they were like, all right, you can have Danger Zone as well.
And then Kenny Loggins is sitting there go, damn it, I didn't pick the song that won the Oscar.
And then they got Berlin for Take My Breath Away, obviously.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff.
Top Gun.
Jay?
Awesome movie.
Jay?
Yeah. Yes.
How you doing over there, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing great. I just love the different perspectives on this movie. It's been very fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So with that said, though, Jay, before we get out of here,
Yeah.
we got to test your award season knowledge based on the film we just reviewed in a segment we like to call "It's an Honor to Get Nominated." Now, JD, I explained this to you earlier before we started the show, but Jay is our he's our resident Oscar expert, and he's all things awards.
I love it.
He's
he's like the one that watches awards.
He's like make it happen 24/7. You know what I mean? And I told him, Jay, you gotta
break
stop.
Each Oscars down like
listen. Jay goes to all the movies around the world, and he doesn't care about the quality of cinema.
I don't review movies. I talk about their
Oscars chances. He's like, I only see it through the vacuum of an Oscar, and if it doesn't matter, then it stinks. That's Jay Ledbetter.
I have no opinion of Elemental, but I knew it was going to get an Oscar nomination when I saw it,
and it did.
So
there you go.
He called it. Yeah.
So if you want to help him, you can, JD. I don't know if you do already know if this movie has been nominated for Oscars, but if you want to help him, you can. But if you do know, please don't help, because we like to keep Jay in the dark as much as possible.
At least not until I give up.
Yeah, at least until he gives up. But Jay, I have to ask you.
Yeah.
Fundamentally good question. Was Top Gun, not Maverick, Top Gun, the original, 1986, was it nominated for any Oscars?
This one
definitely was. Jay. I know that this is an Oscar-winning film.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
Best original song, it won.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You took my breath away with that answer, Jay.
Outside I see what you did that, there. I do believe that it got other nominations.
Okay.
I am going to assume it got a sound nomination.
That is correct. And I'm just gonna help you out here because you're not gonna know this. So this would be kind of rude to you. It got best sound and best sound effects editing. So this is in the 80s when the sound categories are. Listen, this is when they were split. Best sound was the mixing,
sound separate.
Yeah, and then the sound effects was then a sound editing. They're just. It should just be sound mixing and editing. It shouldn't. Yeah. So I'll give you those. So you got 3.
And then of course beach volleyball scene. Nominated for that.
Well, there wasn't enough beach volleyball scenes that year to qualify for
best baby oil team.
Yeah, baby oil. That's a good cosign, baby oil. Yeah, there you go.
This Top Gun movie would have had some good run at the InSession Film Awards as far as Jay's special awards go.
Special categories.
You'd make some really good
that
stuff
would have been a
out
lot
of
of
this
fun.
movie.
Yeah. Other than that, would it have gotten anything else?
The
only other thing it might have gotten is editing, but I don't think it was respected enough to get that. I'm going to cap it at 3.
Well, you shouldn't have capped it at 3, Jay, because it got 4.
Okay.
And it got best film editing nomination.
Dang it. Oh.
You always do this to yourself.
I should have gone with my gut.
You always should overperform, never underperform.
That was almost one of my better performances.
That was. You were close. Even though I did give you one, but I'm just trying to be nice. Whatever. What are you going to do? 1987 Oscars.
Yeah.
Jay mentioned the film that won Best Picture earlier in the episode. This was Platoon. This was big Ollie Stone year.
Yeah.
I got to say, haven't seen it.
Really?
Never seen Platoon.
Finally saw it last year. The definition of fine.
Can't wait for our Oliver Stone series.
That would be okay for real. If we did that, the books that you would buy and then would be really questionable.
I already own his autobiography.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you check and make sure it's not being tapped by the government? I
got it signed by Edward Snowden.
Oh, okay. Shit. Anyway, this podcast has been flagged by the United States government now. Films that were nominated for Best Picture were Children of a Lesser God, Hannah and Her Sisters from Jay's Guy, The Mission, and A Room with a View.
That is not exactly the most iconic Best Picture lineup of all time.
Yeah. Have you guys seen The Mission?
No.
I have not seen The Mission.
Really? I'm surprised, JD, you haven't seen The Mission.
No?
Because it has an incredible Ennio Morricone score attached to it.
I've probably listened.
It is one of his greatest scores.
Yeah, it's
like
epic. I have listened to the score.
I think you should watch the film. It's really,
Bobby
fascinating.
De Niro?
Yeah, Bobby De Niro.
Look at that.
Jeremy Irons.
Liam Neeson in there.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
Wow.
Yeah,
Right,
there you go.
That.
Do you guys now one best original song? Would you guys give this any of the wins that it was nominated? I mean, it lost sound to Platoon, it lost editing to Platoon, and it lost best sound effects editing. It lost to Aliens.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not having seen Platoon, I assume it's a big honking war movie. I bet the sound is pretty good.
Yeah.
I can live with Aliens for sure.
You can okay.
Film edit.
Only 3 nominees in that category.
Yeah. What gives?
I know.
Doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. I'm okay with it not winning any of those.
Oh, Round Midnight was this year. That's a good movie. You guys seen Round Midnight?
Nope.
No,
great score again. JD, great score from Herbie Hancock.
Unfrosted.
Yeah, but Jay, and I love you, but you know the unfrosted bit's got to die right here, right?
Think about the opportunity cost of me watching Unfrosted. I could have watched.
You watched it on the plane, no?
No, I watched that at home.
Oh, it feels like a plane movie.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
It feels like a big old.
I watched Blade and Blade 2 on the plane.
Now that's a good plane watch.
I understand that.
Why? Yeah. What is it about the plane that makes people watch action movies? Because when I've traveled over the last couple of years, the number one movies I always see people, because I'm a little nosy and I like to poke my head around, right? Number one movies everybody want to watch are John Wick. Everybody's watching the John Wick on the planes.
I didn't see a single John Wick on the plane.
You didn't see a Wick on the plane?
No. Very eclectic mix. I was sending you
people's
updates on what people are watching on the plane.
What were they again, Jay? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh. And I can definitely look it up.
I mean, yeah.
This is bad. This is bad content. I'm not going to do that.
We're not going to judge other people's stuff. JD, would you nominate Top Gun in any other category?
Would you give it best pick nom?
I would give it best picture. Hell yeah.
Over those movies, I'm damn sure JD would. Would you nominate him for director?
I would nominate it. Yeah, I would give it director. I would for sure do editing.
Director is Oliver Stone won. You got James Ivory for A Room with a View, Ronald Jaffe for the Mission, Jay Sky, Woody Allen, Hannah and Her Sisters.
Oh, can't wait for that series.
And a serious J guy, David Lynch for Blue Velvet.
Hell yeah.
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 That's like one of those, once again, Jay, where he was only nominated for director, and that's it for the rest of the
Lynch
film.
special.
It's the Lynch special. Yeah, he's just that a couple times in his career, where they're like, "We love you, but the rest of your shit, not today."
We love you, but not your movie.
Yeah, which is like, it's like the opposite of Barbie. They'll love everything about the movie, but you. But they love David Lynch, but not the movie.
Hillary Clinton was so beat up by that.
Man, God, just.
All right, we're not going
No, we're not doing that. See what you do.
One of the most unhinged, one of the most insane tweets of all time.
I mean, yes. But JD, you were saying you would nominate that in picture, director. Did you said screenplay?
Maybe. It's very possible. I'd have to look at the other nominees.
So, Hannah and Her Sisters, Crocodile Dundee.
Then yes, absolutely.
No, excuse me.
Over that.
Which movie has the line, "That's not a knife. This is a knife"?
It's actually Top Gun Maverick has that line. I don't know if you know that. That's right. My Beautiful Laundrette.
Crocodile Dundee was a phenomenon.
Platoon and Salvador, which was
you Salvador. Ever seen the Crocodile Dundee movies?
No,
they're bad.
Stone got double nominated for.
I've seen
screenplay?
all
Get outta here.
3 Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, Stone got in there for Salvador.
Yeah,
His other movie.
I would
too.
definitely put in Top Gun over that.
I've never seen The Mission, but I've seen Crocodile Dundee 3.
Well, you are a complete. Well, you are a completist. I would not be surprised if you didn't watch Crocodile Dundee 3.
I watched Crocodile Dundee 1. You better believe I'm watching Crocodile.
Do you think that they would remake Crocodile Dundee?
Remember when they teased that was going to happen, but it ended up being a commercial campaign?
Was it going to be Hemsworth?
Like Chris Hemsworth and Danny McBride was in it too. Yeah,
I knew it was going to be Hemsworth. Guys, undefeated. Any other spots, guys? Cinematography, maybe? No?
Yeah,
maybe cinematography. I think it's a gorgeous movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it cinematography.
Would you nominate it in score?
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that was one I mentioned earlier. Score for sure.
The score was Around Midnight for Herbie Hancock one, but Aliens, Hoosiers, The Mission, and you guys are going to really laugh at this one, but Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home.
I mean, obviously.
Yeah. Top Gun definitely, I think, could have been nominated. Yeah, 100%.
You know what's kind of, and I guess this is like the last thing we can mention, and then we can get out of here. And I think this is like the real staying power. And another thing that, like, the feather in the cap of this movie is Take My Breath Away, winning the Oscar.
It's a big song.
Mm-hmm. When do we get big songs? I mean, like, I guess like the Barbie movie last year, like all the songs were really big.
They
but
play
like,
that song so many times in the movie.
Which one?
They
Take My
like
Breath Away?
6 times. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was Wong Kar-wai directing this at a certain point.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I was like repeating it over and over again. But like, no, like the 80s was like the era of like, if your song won an Oscar, it probably was a giant hit as well.
But they were actually in the movie, not in the end.
Yeah, they weren't in the end credits.
Yeah.
Like Lady Gaga's song is
that is actually one of my biggest beefs with the Oscars. The song should have to be in the movie.
But what if it
in the end credits?
But Jay, what if it bleeds from the last scene of the film and transitions the second half of the song into the credits? Like Hold My Hand from Lady Gaga.
I think that's okay.
That should count, right?
As long as it is in
the movie.
The movie.
Yeah.
Before credits roll, the song has to play.
Yeah.
And it can't be like 15 seconds while they show the last shot.
Like half of it.
Like, yeah, something like that.
Like half the song has to play. And then like because you know what I'm trying to say, right, Jay? Because like Gaga's song is literally as they're flying off, him and Jennifer Connelly are flying away, and it's singing with all the.
That's in the movie.
Yeah, I know it's not in the movie until the end, which is the credits. So it's like half
a very
and half.
Emotionally charged song in the context of the actual movie.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to help you out with your logic, because like when you think of
the score also plays on that song throughout the movie.
That's true. Like when they're on the boat
to that song. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, all right. Well, Jay's new Oscar rules. They better fix them now.
It's so stupid because nobody cares about that category because nobody knows they're not in the movie.
Well, I always thought it was funny. Like a couple of years ago when the "We Don't Talk About Bruno" song didn't get nominated, and the other one for Encanto did, and it's a beautiful song. But then they were like, no, but we still need to play that at the Oscars, and it's like, well, you can't play that you refused to make it eligible. Yeah, so it's like
intensely stupid.
So intensely stupid. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, JD.
All right.
Hey.
Thank you for coming on this show. Doing this
with JD in a while.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It's the InSession Awards, probably.
Those last time that we spoke together, Ryan was on the show a few weeks ago because we just started this Best Picture movie series.
Yeah, JD doesn't want me on. He just wants Ryan on.
Well, I told Ryan earlier, as the Oscars expert, I'm surprised you haven't been begging me to be on. Of course, you could come on anytime you want.
JD, I did a 3-hour Oscar podcast recently.
No, 3 hours. That's a lot for you.
And the runner-up is with.
I do
past
remember
and future guest Kevin Jacobson.
And he just loves to pat himself on the back for actually
reorient my relationship with the Oscars. No, I just want to plug his.
Are you gonna? Does that mean? But here's the real question: you may
Kevin will
reorder
never
it.
have me back on.
Well, I mean, you did say a lot of mean things about him.
It was rated,
really
I
rude.
believe, the review in the Wall Street Journal said worst podcast of all time.
No, but I mean, the real fundamental question is, from all that soul searching about the Oscars and everything, Jay, are you going to watch the 2025 ceremony?
No. So here's my relationship with the Oscars now. Is I think they're really interesting as like a cultural snapshot and like an industry. I think there's interesting.
It's an interesting time capsule, you know.
Yeah, sort of exploration of what the world of movies and the campaigning of movies was like.
But you're not going to watch the show next year.
No, it's a bad TV show.
Okay,
it's a bad TV show.
But you didn't watch like this past year and see like Gosling do I'm Just Kidding?
I saw the highlights on my favorite website, X.
Do you got stock in X?
Me and Elon are.
Oh, you're pretty tight. Okay.
Yeah.
JD, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work before this Joker continues his rampage tonight?
You can find us all on X as well. But you can find everything about us at InSessionFilm.com. We have weekly podcasts, tons of written content, all kinds of fun stuff. The easiest way to find us is InSessionFilm.com. But yes, we're on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Facebook. We're everywhere. So yeah, come hit us up. We'll be glad to have you. And thanks for having me, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was awesome to have you, JD. You'll be back.
Yes. Yes, he will. We will have JD back on.
We didn't even fight. We got to fight next time.
No fighting, you two. Just all love. All love here.
All love.
J-Dog.
Yes.
Where can we find you and all your work? Recommendation, all that stuff.
Yeah, Letterboxd, J Ledbetter, Twitter at Mr. J Ledbetter. Any writing I'm doing, find it over at AwardsWatch. Recommendation of the week. Ryan, I watched a movie pretty much right before we hopped on for this podcast. I watched the movie Perfect Blue for the first time. You ever seen that one? Satoshi Kon?
No, I haven't seen Perfect Blue.
One of the kind of premier anime films of all time. Great movie. I loved it. Man, it is a real trippy, dark, psychologically thrilling movie. Content is very, very adult. It's so challenging. It's about this Japanese pop star who quits her girl group to become an actress. And then she sort of like goes down this rabbit hole of, it turns into this world of murder and exploitation and all sorts of stuff. It's 1 hour and 21 minutes. Can't ask for more than that.
Hey.
I highly, highly recommend it. I had an amazing time with it. It's also one of Darren Aronofsky's favorite movies.
Damn it. God, you really were selling it. And then you just...
It is one of his favorite movies, to the point that he bought the rights to it to, I believe, try to make a live action remake, couldn't get the funding for it, and then just directly stole a shot from it in Requiem for a Dream. And then Black Swan is entirely influenced by this, but this is, I think, much better than Black Swan.
Well, I mean, I would hope so.
Perfect Blue. JD, you seen Perfect Blue?
I don't think so.
No.
Highly recommend.
Gotta catch up on it.
Not with the kid.
Yeah, not with the kid around.
Not with the kids. Put him in bed. Not in front of the TV screen for that one.
81 minutes.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. Over at the website, podcasts. If you love podcasts, we do one every Monday. It's the Awards Watch podcast with the team. That releases on Monday. This releases on Thursdays. 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. We greatly appreciate it. While you're over on the website too, sign up for the newsletter. It's the best place to get news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, all sent to you twice a week. Greatly appreciate that. Recommendation of the week. I watched a movie I hadn't seen in a long time, and it's from a director that I feel like we're going to have to cover him at a certain point, Jay. He's one of your boys. I'm saying this because he's like one of like the boys of like one of the more fascinating filmographies ever. And it's Robert Zemeckis. I watched Contact.
Oh,
last
Bobby
week.
Z. That dude's never made a bad movie.
You saying that about Marwan?
Marwan is actually a fascinating
I knew you were going to say Pinocchio.
Pinocchio is one of the worst movies of the last 10 years.
I got to tell you,
Marwan's got some stuff going on.
I think, so one, Eric Anderson, our editor in chief, he was on a podcast, the Screen Drafts, and with Jacqueline Coley, and they were talking about they were doing the top draft for Jodie Foster films, and Eric drafted Contact, and I hadn't seen Contact in years.
Contact rocks.
Contact is a fascinating film, and I think if we did Zemeckis, we're totally talking Contact, and that thing would go off the rails quickly because that movie is kind of insane. It was his follow-up to Forrest Gump, and I think it is way better than Forrest Gump, but it is also one of those just like...
Is it that old? I didn't realize that was the order.
97. Yeah. Because Forrest Gump's 94.
So then... 90.
Yeah.
That long a gap after Forrest Gump?
Yeah, I think so. But anyway, truly just this fascinating space film and kind of weirdly relevant considering the fact that the biggest point of this movie, and I kind of forgot about it, is how our sort of obsession with Americans having to be at the forefront of this discovery, religion being at the forefront of this discovery. It really had a lot of interesting things that we are still stubbornly fighting to this day. And so I find it a fascinating movie. It's one of Jodie Foster's best performances. And so, yeah, just if you want to like an interesting film. Yeah, early McConaughey. He's not bad. I know Eric hates him in that film, but I don't think he's not great, but he's not bad.
James Wood's good in it.
James Wood is very good in it. Tom Skerritt also in it. Tom Skerritt also in it, and he's great. But yeah, I would say Contact, go watch it just to experience whatever the hell they were on in 1997 deciding to make that film.
Yeah. Just chiming in to say Contact rules.
JD, you got a recommendation? You seen
anything that you'd like to recommend the audience real quick before you get out of here? Putting you on the spot. It can be old, it can be new.
I know you liked Apes.
I did like the new Apes. Yeah, I thought it was a fascinating exploration of religion in context of Caesar and the history of Caesar. Actually, one that I don't know if I can say recommendation, but one film, and I guess this is somewhat shameless because we just talked about it on our show, was Mrs. Miniver. I think is a fascinating film to talk about.
Yeah,
a fascinating movie. Yeah, I
the best picture winner.
Dug it, but
that's a Willy Wyler.
Willy Wyler. Yeah,
Willy Wyler.
Yep, Willy Wyler. I dug it because it's a movie that, yes, it's propagandistic for sure, but I think it's also much more than it's propaganda. And I think
a little bit of a Top Gun in that regard.
It's a little Top Gun in that regard. and also I think it's a film you really, really need to understand the context of the time, because 1942, the war was still very much up in the air. It was far from being decided at that point. And if you look at a map of Germany in 1942, it's a little one-sided at that point. Like the fear and trepidation they would have been feeling, I think, comes through in that film in a great way. Like in context, or in hindsight now, it might seem a little tacky, but like at the time they really didn't know. Like the literal world was at stake.
Yeah.
So I think under that prism, I think there's a lot more fascinating things going on in that movie. So yeah, I loved it.
I haven't seen it in such a long time.
I haven't seen it ever.
So gonna have to give it a shot.
Watch the app or listen to the app.
Listen to we'll have to do so.
We talk about a lot of that stuff. So
all right. Well, that's gonna be it for Top Gun.
One of our longer eps.
It is one of our longer eps. We'll be back next week. Thank you, JD. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about Days of Thunder. We're getting in the car and we're driving.
Oh, yeah. Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom. Cars go vroom, vroom.
Top Gun on wheels.
Yes, exactly. We will have the great Karen Peterson on to join us for that episode. We can't wait to discuss that film with you all. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.